Hey guys. Tonight, we bathe like a Roman witch. Spoiler alert. Is less luxurious spa and more steamy. Bacteria-infested obstacle course. Picture this. You're stepping barefoot into a dim stone chamber. The air thick with body heat, oil, and a suspicious smell that might be boiled cabbage or someone's armpit. The marble's slick beneath you. The walls are beaded with condensation. And, somewhere in the haze, someone coughs deeply and doesn't cover their mouth. You haven't even undressed yet. And already you're reconsidering this whole civilization thing. Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and current time in the comments. I want to know which corner of the empire you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first clue that something's off is the steam. It rolls over the arched ceilings like a low-hanging cloud. Dense and strangely sweet. Like sweat mixed with rotting herbs. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. And each step sounds like a suction cup releasing from wet stone. Slap, slap, slap. Around you, half-naked figures shuffle and mumble, moving through a ritual that's equal parts bathing, gossiping, and enduring. You're in a Roman Thermae public bath and you're already too committed to back out. The changing room, called the apoditarium, isn't so much a room as a damp cave filled with niches for clothing and more naked strangers than you expected this early in the evening. You find a spot, strip down, and do your best to avoid eye contact, with the elderly man applying oil to places. Oil really doesn't need to go. Romans, after all, didn't have soap. Nope, their idea of getting clean involved slathering your body with olive oil, sometimes infused with herbs or perfumes, then scraping it off with a tool called a strigil. Think of it as exfoliation. If exfoliation required a metal blade and a very casual attitude toward hygiene, you squint into the mist and see the outline of the Palestron open courtyard where people wrestle, box, and do jumping jacks, for reasons that aren't entirely clear. Everyone's already sweaty before they even make it to the bath proper. Which makes sense. Because to the Romans, bathing wasn't about quick cleanliness. It was a social ritual, drawn out and layered. First, the workout, then the oil, then the scrape, then the warm bath, then the hot bath, then the cold plunge, and somewhere in there, someone's bound to mention how much better the old republic was. The smell, though, it never fully leaves your nostrils. Not because it's overpowering, though at times it is, but because it's layered. A base note of mildew from the constantly damp floors, a middle tone of oil and sweat, and then, wafting over everything, a hint of something sour. Maybe it's the communal latrines just 2 rooms over. Maybe it's someone's feet. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses were cleaned daily, or just, when the filth threatened to rise over the lip of the pool, you shuffle with the crowd into the tepidarium, the warm room, and sit on a stone bench, slick with condensation and residual thigh juice. A man beside you sneezes. Another one is humming to himself while massaging oil into his belly like it's a sacred ritual. You try to pretend your bottom isn't sticking to the stone. No one else seems to notice. And here's the kicker. This isn't even the grossest part. Some scholars suggest that bathing in Rome was cleaner than doing nothing at all, which is fair. But others point out that the water in the pools was rarely changed, especially in the larger bathhouses that hosted hundreds or even thousands of visitors per day. You're essentially soaking in a people soup that's been reheated hourly. As you sit, someone slides past you, nearly knocking over a small amphora of oil. No one apologizes. Everyone's too focused on their personal process. A young man on the other bench is muttering the Iliad while pulling something unidentifiable out of his toenail. Meanwhile, a bath attendant walks by carrying a tray of snacks, because yes, people ate here. Hot chickpeas, mulled wine, maybe even some questionable oysters if you're in the mood for gastrointestinal roulette. You're ushered onward to the caldarium, the hot room, and immediately feel like your eyebrows are about to melt. The heat is intense, volcanic, and humid, as if someone boiled a pond and sealed it inside a tomb. You try to breathe shallowly. The floor is warm beneath your feet, heated by the hypocaust system underfloor network of hot air channels. It's ingenious, really, and slightly terrifying, because sometimes the floors collapse, or catch fire, or trap a poor maintenance slave who'd been trying to clean soot off the ducts. There's a large marble tub in the center, fed by steaming water, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple of a submerged elbow or floating hair. You hover awkwardly by the edge, debating how much you really care about being clean. Then someone nudges you ingently, but still, and now you're submerged up to your chest in what feels like lukewarm soup and ancient back sweat. This is fine, you think. This is how people bond. This is culture. But there's also the matter of skin conditions. Roman baths were infamous breeding grounds for skin infections, fungi, and even lice. No one talks about that, of course. Instead, they boast about how good their skin feels after a scrape and a soak. Still, you find yourself noticing the blotchy rash on the man across from you and wondering if it's contagious. He notices your gaze and winks. Great. Someone claps loudly and announces that it's time for a cold plunge. Everyone groans, but begins moving toward the frigidarium, where a deep, waits, cold water is piped in from aqueducts, and stepping into it after the heat feels like getting slapped by a wet ghost. Your muscles tense. Your lungs forget how to inhale. And just when you think you might pass out, you're pulled up by a laughing man who tells you that means it's working. You finally stumble out, dripping, breathless, and more confused than refreshed. You wrap yourself in a thin cloth still damp from its previous owner and head back to the changing area. Your skin feels different, not cleaner, just more aware of itself. And the smell? It lingers, now mixed with oil and faint flowers, like someone tried to cover up a disaster with potpourri. You spot someone you recognize, the guy who tried to sell you fermented fish sauce earlier, and he waves as if this whole thing has bonded you. Maybe it has. You survived your first Roman bath. Barely. You're back in the apoditarium, dripping and slightly dazed. And now comes the part you were hoping to avoid standing there. Completely naked, while dozens of strangers give you a once-over like they're inspecting a statue for cracks. And unlike statues, you've got a very real sunburn in progress, and one sock that somehow got left behind. Public nudity in Rome isn't just common. It's expected. Modesty? That's for barbarians. You glance around, hoping no one's paying too much attention. Wrong. The man leaning against the marble column. He's not just anyone. He's wearing a senator's ring. And he's watching everyone like a hawk, bored out of his skull. He scratches his beard, shifts his weight, and keeps his eyes locked on the procession of bodies heading toward the Palaestra. There's something unsettling about being judged by someone who writes laws while you're still trying to figure out where to put your tunic. Welcome to the Roman bathhouse, where people watching is a national pastime. And being watched is the price of admission. You shuffle forward. A small boy runs past, completely nude and shrieking with laughter, while a stern-faced matron clutches a bundle of herbs and mutters about youth these days. In the corner, a pair of older women are having a spirited conversation, punctuated by snorts, glares, and the occasional point at someone's behind. It's unclear if they're praising or mocking. Possibly both. Historians still argue whether Roman society genuinely embraced nudity or merely tolerated it as part of bathing culture. Some say it was about body pretty and admiration for physical form rooted in Greek influence. Others insist it was just pragmatism. You can't exactly bathe in a toga. Still, the fact remains, everyone's naked, and most of them are staring. You try to pretend you're invisible. Unfortunately, the more you try to disappear, the more people seem to notice you. A young man with overly enthusiastic hair gestures to your strigil and asks if you'd like help scraping. You decline. Politely, but firmly, he shrugs and walks off, immediately offering the same service to the next unsuspecting soul. Peeking through the steam, you catch sight of a man doing stretches that can only be described as intimate. He's perched on one leg like a flamingo, with commitment issues, and he seems quite proud of the audience he's attracting. In the far corner, a group of teenagers are practicing wrestling moves that look suspiciously like rehearsed ways to fall into each other's laps. You wonder if they're here to bathe or flirt. Probably both. But it's not all lighthearted awkwardness. Public nudity here comes with a layer of power dynamics that's hard to ignore. A slave passes through, shoulders bowed, his tunic, the only scrap of modesty in the room. No one looks twice. Then, two older men with elaborate gold hairpins enter the space, and the crowd instinctively shifts, creating a path. Wealth, status, and influence are always visible, even when clothes aren't. You begin to notice the subtle codes, the quality of the oil flask someone carries, the design on a strigil, the cut of a discarded tunic folded nearby. One man sits in an elevated nichino because he owns the bathhouse, but because he's wealthy enough to reserve it. Yes, people reserve spots in Roman baths. And yes, it's considered impressive to watch others bathe while eating grapes in your personal alcove like a smug cucumber. Still, the baths are oddly democratic, at least on paper. Rich and poor alike share the same steam, same pools. Same, communal grime. Emperors have been known to bathe alongside farmers. Whether the emperor actually wanted to be there is another matter. But the symbolism? Hugely important. It's a display of unity, of Rome's grand idea that every one citizen or not can sweat together in the name of hygiene and gossip. Of course, not everyone came willingly. Some slaves are dragged in by their masters to be washed like horses. Others are forced to stand guard over their owner's belongings in the changing room and open-air locker system, just begging for theft. You eye your own modest bundle of clothes and wonder if they'll still be there when you return. Probably not. Petty theft in bathhouses was common enough that curses have been found carved into walls. To whoever stole my tunic, may you itch forever. Oh. A man beside you, completely nude and inexplicably wearing one sandal, begins a long-winded speech about the moral decline of youth. You zone out halfway through his ode to the Republic but catch snippets about how in his day, men bathed without performing ballet routines in the frigidarium. He sighs deeply, picks up a fig from his pouch, and eats it with more judgment than most courtroom juries. You finally head toward the massage area. Trying to blend in, a group of bathers parts to let a group of musicians through yays. Sometimes there's music. A flute trio sets up in the corner, their tunes bouncing oddly off the wet stone. It's like bathing in a poorly lit concert hall. The walls here are lined with frescoes. Some beautiful, some wildly inappropriate. You pause before a scene depicting Venus rising from a shell, only to realize the shell has been scratched into a shape that is less shell, more anatomy. Roman humor, apparently, never misses a chance for innuendo. You try to walk confidently, chest out, shoulders back, but every step feels like a performance. Especially when passing the lounging officials in their golden oil-glazed repose. One raises an eyebrow. Another whispers something to his friend. You resist the urge to trip on purpose and disappear into the steam. Eventually, you make it back to the warm pool, joining a group of quieter bathers. Here, no one's watching. Or, if they are, they've gotten more subtle about it. You slide into the water, which is blessedly only moderately suspicious. You close your eyes. For one brief moment, it almost feels like peace. Then someone cannonballs in next to you, and you're back in the chaos. As you towel off with something that feels like a damp scarf, you overhear a man boasting that he once bathed next to Julius Caesar himself. Someone else counters that he bathed beside an emperor and lived to tell the tale. A third person chimes in with a whisper about having seen Cicero himself using a strigil shaped like a dolphin. Whether any of this is true is irrelevant. In the Roman baths, every story gets a little steamier. You head back to your clothes, which, miraculously, are still there, and start getting dressed. A boy sprints past, steals someone's sandal, and disappears into the fog. No one chases him. No one cares. Just another day at the Thermae. You're almost dressed when you notice that your tunic feels wetter than it should, and it smells faintly of someone else's cologne. Either someone tried it on, or it was used as a makeshift towel. You try not to think about it. At least it's mostly intact. You sling it over your shoulder, still damp, and step cautiously into the next chamber, where ideals of cleanliness and reality collide like gladiators with poor depth perception. This is where Roman values start to feel a bit contradictory. You're standing in a space designed to purify, cleanse, and elevate the body. Yet the very air you're breathing smells like armpit-infused incense and yesterday's oysters. Roman elites wrote entire treatises on the virtue of cleanliness, of decorum, proper conduct, hygiene, the glow of a well-scraped body. They spoke of the baths with poetic reverence, calling them places of renewal and restoration. But you can't help noticing that the man next to you is cleaning his ears with a chicken bone. That's not a joke. That's genuinely happening. You head toward another warm pool. This one, surrounded by mosaics of Neptune taming seahorses that seem to leer at you. A bath attendant barefoot, disheveled, and clearly done with life offers you a handful of oil. He doesn't smile. You accept it and begin smearing it across your arms like you know what you're doing, trying to embody the Roman idea of grooming, which, to be honest, is more about looking shiny than actually being clean. Romans didn't scrub with soap. No bubbles. No floral lavender lathers. No. Scented shampoos. Just olive oil and scraping. They believed the oil lifted dirt from the skin, and the strigil, the curved metal blade, would pull everything off in one satisfying swoop. If that everything includes dead skin, dirt, sweat, and the emotional residue of being ogled by a senator, well, so be it. You crouch on a low marble bench, run your hands over your oiled forearms, and begin the scraping. At first, it feels oddly satisfying, like peeling off a layer of yourself, but then the man next to you coughs something up and spits it directly into the corner, and you're reminded that you're not alone. You try not to look. But now you're locked in a weird eye contact loop with an old man scrubbing his knee like he's trying to erase it. It's this strange dissonance between what the baths are supposed to be and what they actually are that starts to mess with your head. Romans claimed their baths were sacred spaces, civilizing forces. Seneca, the philosopher, once grumbled that he couldn't concentrate in a bathhouse because of the grunts, the gossip, the splashes, the screaming of masseurs, and the slaps of flesh on stone. And yet, he kept going. Historians still argue whether these baths were primarily about hygiene or social control. Were they the great equalizers of Roman society, or just another tool to distract the masses with warm water and wine? Either way, you're now part of the system, sweating, scraping, and trying not to slide off your bench. You pass by a basin where someone is soaking their feet. The water is cloudy, with oil and floating toenail clippings. A child splashes into it with unearned confidence and receives a half-hearted scolding from a slave whose job description definitely doesn't include wrangling other people's kids. A woman with tightly wound braids strides past you, her expression fierce, her sandals precise. She's one of the wealthier patrons. You can tell, not just by her gold necklace, but by the way no one dares jostle her. She glances at the corner where two teenage boys are mock-fighting and raises one eyebrow. Instantly, they retreat into the steam like chastised ghosts. You move into a quieter alcove and sit beside a fountain. The gentle trickle of water provides a brief moment of peace, interrupted only by the slow creak of wood as someone leans back too far on a bath chair. You look up at the fresco above you, two cherubs battling with oversized sponges sand, wonder if it's meant to be charming or just vaguely threatening. All around you, the rituals of Roman bathing unfold like clockwork. People oil themselves, scrape, dunk, gossip, stretch, nap. No one's rushing. Time here is as thick as the air. Everything moves in lazy loops conversations about politics, next to whispering lovers, the slap of wet feet mingling with philosophical debates about fate, fortune, and fig prices. You're starting to understand that the baths are less about getting clean and more about being seen. It's where deals are made. Enemies are assessed. Friendships for mortar dissolved in heated arguments over whether cabbage is good for the spleen. It is, according to Pliny, supposedly. But back to the decorum. Romans genuinely believed that bathing improved one's character. A polished, oiled body meant you were civilized. A dirty body? Barbaric. And yet, here you are, slipping on someone's discarded sandal while trying to avoid a puddle that might be water. Probably water. Hopefully, still. You can't help but admire the engineering. These places didn't just appear. They were feats of architecture and plumbing genius vaulted ceilings that trapped steam. Bronze mirrors for checking your scraped glow. And a whole underground labyrinth of pipes, furnaces, and slaves shoveling wood to keep it all running. Bathhouses were the pride of Roman cities, symbols of power and culture. But even in this grand design, the cracks show. A rat darts across a shadowy corner, earning no reaction. A tile slips slightly beneath your foot. Somewhere, someone screams not in pain, just indignation. Someone else has taken their towel. You shift to another bench, closer to the exit, and watch a trio of women debating loudly about which bathhouse in the city has the best cold plunge. One insists the baths of Agrippa. Another swears by the newer complex on the Aventine. The third, eyes half closed, mutters that they're all full of men who wear too much perfume and not enough shame. You chuckle quietly and are immediately offered a fig by a stranger. It's warm and mushy. You eat it anyway. Somehow, it fits the mood. Eventually, you return to the edge of a pool, legs dangling, hair frizzing in the humidity, and realize something profound. You are not cleaner. Not really. But you are different, altered by the chaos. The rituals, the awkward nudity and soft chaos of Roman life. Maybe that's what the baths are for, not purification, but transformation. Or maybe you're just lightheaded from all the steam. Either way, as another stranger slides in beside you, says, "Hot enough for you?" and begins flossing his teeth with a rosemary twig. You realize you've adapted. You're a bathhouse person now. Sort of. You don't notice the missing soap because there never was any. No bars. No bubbles. No lavender-scented lathers. Just oil. Oil and metal. And more oil. You're handed another small flask. This one smells like oregano, left in a sun-warmed cartand, a slightly bent strigil that's been used more times than you care to imagine. A bath attendant gives you a curt nod, as if to say, "Get scraping or get out." So you do. You settle yourself on a low ledge near the wall, avoiding a suspicious puddle that might have eyes, and start the ritual once more. A little oil, rubbed vigorously into the skin arms, chest, legs, even your ankles, if you're feeling ambitious. The oil traps dirt, they say, lifts it away from the body. But it's also viscous and, in the heat, kind of sticky. You're beginning to wonder if the Romans ever questioned this method. Historians still debate whether olive oil was truly effective as a cleanser, or whether it was simply a glorified lotion ritual, layered with tradition and placebo. You glance down the row and see a man performing the same movements, but with the intensity of someone trying to scrub off years of regret. His strigil moves fast, scraping off oil, grime, and probably the top layer of his soul. The sound is unmistakably a wet, metallic chirp, like peeling a fruit that doesn't want to be peeled. And then it hits you. Not just the oddity of it all, but the smell, the combination of olive oil, human sweat, leftover perfume, and something else older, like a spice cupboard that hasn't been opened in decades. You wonder how often they clean the strigils. You immediately regret wondering. Nearby, a boy drops his oil flask. It rolls across the wet tile, knocking into someone's ankle. No one reacts, probably because it happens every 10 minutes. The floor is a hazard zone, slick with sweat and oil. You almost went down earlier, while trying to reach for a sandal. And still, no soap, not a bar in sight. You start to fantasize about Itone's small square of honest, frothy lather. You imagine the sound it would make in this room. The squeak of fingers against real suds. You imagine what it might smell like. Citrus. Maybe. Or pine. Instead, your nostrils are filled with the earthy scent of basil and feet. One man stands proudly and calls for a friend to admire his sheen. "Look at this glow," he declares, raising his arms like a victorious gladiator. His friend nods solemnly. "You look like a roasted pig." Compliment? Insult? Unclear. But the man seems pleased. A woman walks in with a strigil carved in ivory. Decorative. Probably expensive. Possibly cursed. She begins scraping with the precision of a surgeon, removing layers of oil in long, curling ribbons. The way she stares at the strigil afterward makes you think she's proud of what she's removed. You do your best not to make eye contact. Roman baths had no privacy, and no room for shame. If you were shy about your body or your technique, this was not the place for you. Strigils came in all shapes and materials: bronze, iron, silver for the rich, even bone. They were personal, but often borrowed. Yes, borrowed. You wonder how many different people have scraped themselves with the same piece of bent metal. You choose to believe it's only one. A comforting lie. Some bathers bring slaves with them to assist in the process. These slaves are trained to apply oil, scrape, and occasionally massage their masters without comment. You watch one such attendant gently scrape his owner's back, his expression blank, his eyes glazed over like, "This is the 100th time today." It probably is. The entire process is theatrical. There's posing, flexing, admiring. You half expect someone to pull out a hand mirror and whisper sweet compliments to their own biceps. Everyone here is putting on a show, even the ones pretending not to. Bathing is performance. The oil is your costume. The strigil is your co-star. But there's also real danger here. If you're careless, strigils can cut. They aren't always sharp. But with enough pressure and bad lighting, accidents happen. One man nearby has a scar across his thigh long. White. Probably old. You wonder if it came from a botched scrape or a rough massage. He catches you looking and winks. You immediately turn back to your own limbs. At one point, a strigil slips from someone's hand and clatters loudly to the floor. Everyone pauses. A few mutter. One man sighs and picks it up, handing it back with a grunt. The sound of scraping resonates, like a room full of cats licking their paws in unison. You wonder how the acoustics work. The echo here is strange, muted by the humidity but still present. You finish your scraping, uncertain if you've achieved cleanliness or just moved the grime around in more convincing ways. Your skin feels raw in places, slippery in others. You take a deep breath and catch a whiff of something floral. Someone nearby is using rose oil. You hope it will mask your current odor, which is best described as wood-fired salad. You stand and stretch. A bath attendant gestures toward the plunge pool. Time to rinse. The pool is cooler than the caldarium. Thank the gods. And you lower yourself slowly, watching as the water clouds faintly with oil. There's a thin shimmer on the surface, rainbow red like a pigeon's neck. Beautiful. Until you remember it's made of skin cells. You dunk your head. When you come up, blinking water out of your eyes, you hear laughter. A group of young men comparing their strigils like swords, each claiming theirs is the best. One says his was blessed by a priest. Another insists his belonged to a retired gladiator. A third claims his was passed down from his grandfather, a senator who bathed with Augustus himself. Historically accurate? Probably not. Entertaining? Absolutely. You climb out, dripping and slightly stunned, and make your way back to the warm room to towel off. Towels are rare, sometimes rented, often communal. Yours is thin, questionably clean, and vaguely smells like thyme, but it dries. Sort of. And then, just as you're about to leave, someone offers you one last scrape for good luck. You decline, politely, and faster than necessary. As you pass back through the apoditerium, you spot a new arrival, holding a small box. Inside, a sponge, a comb, a bronze strigiland, a tiny amphora of oil labeled myrtle and almond. Personalized bathing kits were a thing. Status symbols. Even. You nod with respect. The man grins proudly, unaware that within an hour, his almond oil will smell like everyone else's olive sweat. You head toward the outer hall, feeling oily, exposed, oddly proud, and just a little like a cooked vegetable. The strigil may not have made you cleaner, but it's definitely made you shinier. And if that's all the Romans really cared about, then mission accomplished. You haven't even caught your breath when a bath attendant thrusts another strigil at you, this one, a darker bronze, curved like a question mark and flecked with someone else's elbow grease. It's damp and still warm from its last user. You hesitate. The man nods. Apparently, it's yours now. The Roman strigil isn't the kind of instrument you'd find in a modern-day spa. It's not dainty or sterile. It's a utilitarian blade, curved like a talon, designed to drag oil and dirt off the skin in one fluid motion. You run your fingers along its edge, not sharp, but definitely not smooth, and immediately get a sense of why one careless flick could leave a mark. Maybe even a scar. Or, judging by that guy's calf over there, an entire artistic engraving. Historians still argue whether the strigil was more of a health tool or a vanity device. Sure, it scraped off grime, but it also left the skin glossy and stretched taut, like fresh wax fruit. That sheen, it was a status symbol. It said, "I'm rich enough to glow and lazy enough not to do it myself." And you shuffle toward one of the semi-private alcoves and sit on a cool bench carved from marble, flecked with rust-colored stains that may or may not be from ancient exfoliation accidents. You apply a fresh dose of oil, your third today, and begin scraping again. It's hypnotic. Pull the blade, wipe the gunk, repeat, until you have a tiny mound of what can only be described as human sludge collecting by your feet. You side-eye it, mildly horrified, and then do what everyone else does, casually smear it away with your heel and pretend it was never there. Across the alcove, an older man is using a gold-plated strigil shaped like a dolphin. He grins at you with too many teeth and says, "You get used to it." You wonder if he means the tool, the smell, or the entire experience of being half naked in a humid stone room with strangers. Probably all of the above. Bath attendants move between guests, offering replacement oil, complimentary fig paste, and on occasion, unsolicited opinions. One tells you your scraping technique lacks elegance. Another offers to do it for you for a fee. You politely decline, though you're not sure if you're more offended by the suggestion or the price. Suddenly, you hear a shriek not of pain, but of surprise. A young man has just discovered that his strigil has snapped in half mid-scrape. He holds the two jagged pieces like broken tusks, blinking in disbelief. Around him, bathers chuckle. One offers him a spare. Another suggests switching to pumice stone, which is apparently the new thing. You tuck that fact away for later. The man takes the replacement, still looking mildly betrayed by his own tool. You glance back at your own strigil. It's dented, slightly bent, and definitely older than your grandfather's sandals. But it works. Mostly. You continue scraping, adjusting your grip to avoid a blister forming on your thumb. A blister from cleaning. That's the Roman way. An attendant returns with a bucket of warm water, pouring a gentle stream over your shoulders to rinse off the residue. It's almost luxurious until you notice that the water's been used. Not visibly dirty. Just tired. Like it's seen too many backs today. You smile weakly in thanks, pretending not to feel the grit between your shoulder blades. The dolphin strigil man scoots closer, begins telling you the story of his strigil's origins, found in a temple ruin near Neapolis. He says, used by a priest of Apollo. You can still feel the holiness in the curve. You nod, slowly backing away. He doesn't notice. He's too busy polishing it with a cloth that used to be white. Then someone nearby mutters a curse. Literally. A string of Latin profanities aimed at a companion who's apparently borrowed a strigil and returned it with a bent tip. They're squabbling like children, pointing fingers and gesturing wildly with oily hands. A third man intervenes, offering to settle the dispute with a wrestling match. Everyone cheers. You pretend not to exist. You find yourself idly observing other people's tools. One man's strigil is made of bone, smooth and yellowed like antique ivory. A woman uses one carved from dark wood, curved, like a question she's never quite answered. Another patron either, incredibly wealthy or absurdly eccentricas, a matching set, oil flask, comb, and strigil all encrusted with tiny garnets. You don't know whether to be impressed or concerned. The scraping continues, rhythmic and weirdly meditative. Around you, there's a soundtrack of sliding metal, dripping water, occasional grunts, and the low murmur of gossip. The topics range from political scandals to a new bakery opening near the Forum that allegedly sells fig-stuffed buns baked with actual honey. You make a mental note to investigate. Then someone calls out, "Who wants a beard scrape?" A burly man with arms like tree trunks raises his hand and sits back as an attendant moves in with a small, curved blade. Not quite a razor, not quite a strigil, but definitely sharp. You watch, fascinated, as tiny hairs and bits of oil are scraped cleanly from his jaw. No blood, just precision. The man sighs, like he's being sculpted into marble. You start to wonder if you should try it just as the blade nicks his chin, and he lets out a yelp. Never mind. You leave your alcove, skin raw but radiant, and pass through the fog to the communal waste basin. This is where everyone rinses their tools. It's basically a cauldron of used oil, grime, and ambition. You dip your strigil in without looking too closely and give it a shake. When you pull it out, it shines mostly because it's still wet. You wipe it on your towel, which is now just a sad, damp rag hanging off your shoulder. Nearby, a group of boys are trading strigils like collectible cards. "This one's from Hispania," one says. "Mine's got a lion on it," another boasts. A third simply says, "Mine used to be my dad's." The others fall silent. There's always one. As you walk back toward the tepidarium, you hear someone mutter, "At least we're not using sand anymore." You pause. Sand? Apparently. Before olive oil became popular, some, romancer, their predecessors cleaned themselves with sand or ash, rubbing it across the skin and then rinsing. It worked, in a way, but left you feeling like you'd wrestled a beach. You step into the next room. A muscle loose, skin gleaming, strigil, clutched like a well-earned trophy. You survived the scraping. You understand, no, it's not just about cleanliness. It's about ritual, discipline, maybe even identity. You've been buffed like an antique amphora. And though you still smell faintly of basil and questionable decisions, you walk taller, at least until you realize you left your oil flask behind. You double back for your oil flask, which, against all odds, is still sitting exactly where you left it next to the strigil wash basin. Glistening and slightly less full than before. Someone's taken a swig. You stare at the neck of the flask, half expecting teeth marks. Apparently, the line between body oil and cooking oil is thinner than you thought. Clutching your now questionable bottle, you return to the baths, only to veer off toward a low archway that leads somewhere darker and smellier. You've been avoiding this room. You had hoped maybe you could get through one full Roman bath experience without facing it. But no, your bladder and your curiosity are both insisting. Welcome to the latrines, if you've never relieved yourself with 15 other people watching. Tonight's your lucky night. Roman bathhouses didn't separate the restroom from the rest of the complex. In fact, the latrines were often built right next to the hot rooms, separated only by a crumbling wall or a half-hearted curtain. You step inside and immediately wish you hadn't taken a deep breath. The scent is complex. Notes of ammonia, mildew, and something vaguely sour, possibly fermented lentils or fear. You glance around. The latrines are little more than a row of open stone seats, each carved with a keyhole-shaped opening. No stalls, no doors, not even a polite divider. You try to pick the least occupied end. But even then, you're sandwiched between a humming old man and a teenager whistling tunelessly while tracing shapes in the dirt with his foot. The seat is cold. So cold, in fact, that you briefly consider giving up and trying again tomorrow. But there's no turning back now. That's when you spot it, the communal sponge. Sitting in a shallow trough of water running beneath the row of seats is a long stick, to which a sponge is tied with what appears to be a very tired piece of string. That's your ancient Roman toilet paper. Romans called it a tersorium. And yes, it's shared. One sponge. Dozens of people. A single rinse between uses. Maybe. You make eye contact with the sponge. It does not blink. Historians still argue whether the tersorium was genuinely effective or just a symbol of collective denial. Some sources claim vinegar or salt water was added to disinfect the trough. Others insist it was just plain water. Often stagnant. Sometimes reused. The truth probably depends on the bathhouse and how much the attendants cared that day. Judging by the look of this place, not much. You look away from the sponge and focus on the graffiti instead. Yes, the walls here are covered in it, scratched, inked, even painted. Some of it simple, names, dates, declarations of love. Others are crude drawings, shockingly accurate anatomical sketches, or biting insults. One reads, "Marcus is a donkey." Another adds, "Lucia's breath kills flowers." You spot a long poetic rant about someone's lost sandal and how it led to a lifelong vendetta. Roman bathrooms were clearly places of expression. You finish your business as quickly as dignity allows. Avoiding the sponge altogether, you're resourceful. Thank you very much. And stand to rinse your hands in a basin that may or may not have seen cleaner days. There's a trickle of water from a bronze spout shaped like a lion's head. You dunk your fingers, scrub with a bit of leftover oil, and dry them on your now permanently damp towel. As you exit, someone else enters, holding a scroll and muttering about tax policy. You realize people do paperwork in here. In a latrine, the man sits, opens his scroll, and starts reading aloud. You flee. Back in the open hall, the air almost feels fresh by comparison. You take a deeper breath, grateful for the stink of old oil and mildew. It's funny how quickly your standards adapt. You pass a servant carting a bucket filled with more of those sponges. You now know too much. You give the bucket a wide berth and head toward the caldarium once more. Your flask in hand, towel over your shoulder like a war-weary veteran. Nearby, a group of bathers are complaining about the placement of the latrines. Next to the hot room, one groans. "Who thought that was a good idea?" Another laughs. "It keeps the parasites guessing." They all cackle. and you silently vow to never laugh at anything ever again. But there's something deeper here than just bad plumbing choices. The Romans didn't think about bathrooms the way we do. Clean and unclean didn't divide so neatly. Bodily functions weren't tucked away in private cubicles. They were part of public life, part of the bath experience, part of being human. Romans believed in balance. Sweat out your toxins, scrape off your dirt, and yes, empty your bowel saw in the same afternoon. In fact, many bathhouses intentionally placed the latrines along the path between rooms. It was efficient. If you were already sweaty and half naked, why not handle everything at once? Need to gossip? Do it in the latrine. Want to settle a bet? Do it while waiting for the sponge. Need a quick political debate? You know the place. There's a strange equality to it. You realize everyone squats the same. Emperors, senators, slaves. When it comes to the latrine, no one escapes the awkward geometry of those cold stone seats. Still, you can't quite shake the image of the sponge. It's haunting. A woman walks by, drying her hair with a square of cloth that might have once been white. She glances at you and snorts. First time using the tersorium, she asks. You shrug. She nods like she understands everything you've just endured and walks on. You find yourself back in the tepidarium, sitting on a warm bench, letting the sweat trickle slowly from your temples. Around you, the air pulses gently with conversations and steam. Someone passes a tray of figs. Someone else is getting an aggressively thorough back scrape. Everything resumes its rhythm. And now, as your heart rate slows, you realize something. The bathhouse isn't just about the body. It's about the soul. At least, the messy, shared human condition. You've been poked, prodded, scraped, steamed, possibly infected, and definitely traumatized. But you've also been part of something ancient, weirdly communal, and undeniably Roman. You glance down at your hands, shiny from oil, slightly wrinkled from water, and think, maybe, just maybe, you're starting to belong here. Just don't make eye contact with the sponge next time. You're back in the caldarium now, and the heat hits you like a wall of soup. It wraps around your chest, heavy and wet, thick enough to taste. You take a tentative step forward, the stone floor warm beneath your bare feet, and immediately regret forgetting how slippery this room is. Somewhere off to your left, someone coughs in a way that sounds like they've been doing it for centuries. You pass a brazier glowing softly, feeding the room's steam with its constant belly of fire. This is the hot room, the inferno, the purifying sauna, but also the place where tempers flare and arguments brew. And right now, it's packed. You pick your way toward a stone bench, slick with condensation and body grease, trying not to make eye contact with the man stretched out like a cat beside it. He's humming a tune that may or may not be about cheese. A few feet away, two men are locked in a heated argument about agricultural taxes. You think it might also be about the price of cabbages. The words sesterces and idiot are flying fast. You lower yourself onto the bench, instantly aware of just how open your pores feel. The air is almost too hot to breathe properly. Your chest rises slower. Every inhale feels like you're tasting someone else's breath. It's not great. The Romans believed this part of the bathhouse opened up the body, releasing impurities, restoring balance, and making your soul just a little more in tune with the universe. Some even believed the steam could realign your humors, which were thought to control everything from mood to health to how many olives you could digest without spontaneous combustion. Historians still argue whether the caldarium was truly healthful or just a breeding ground for every damp fungus known to man. One thing's certain: you're sweating harder than you ever have in your life. And that includes the time you accidentally wore a wool tunic to a summer banquet. The room is filled with echoing drips, the sizzle of water splashed onto heated stone, and the occasional groan of someone realizing they've sat directly on a hot patch. A slave shuffles past carrying a bucket of steaming water and pours it into a recessed basin, releasing a fresh cloud of vapor that briefly blinds half the room. When it clears, a new man is sitting where you were sure there was no space before. He smiles serenely. You pretend you didn't just jump a little. A few benches down, someone is performing a sort of solo yoga routine, stretching limbs at unnatural angles, sweating profusely but never slipping. You glance away before you pull something just watching. Another person, younger and possibly drunk, has decided to lie flat on the floor, with arms spread wide like a fallen soldier. Occasionally, he whispers, "Hot, so hot," as though narrating his own collapse. There's a distinct hierarchy in the caldarium. The older men sit nearest the hypocaust wall, soaking up the most heat like ancient, crinkled lizards. The youngest cluster near the door, where they can flee quickly if they start to feel faint. You're somewhere in the middle, not yet roasted, but definitely being slow-cooked. You take a moment to wipe your brow with your towel, which is now less cloth and more soggy regret. The heat is doing something strange to your thoughts. Everything feels slow, distant, like you're dreaming someone else's bath. It's in this hazy, borderline hallucinogenic state that you hear someone begin to sing, not a full song, more like a chant, a deep, steady hum that somehow makes the stone beneath you vibrate. Others join in, tapping their strigils rhythmically against the wall, until the sound becomes a pulse, a kind of ritual drumbeat. Whether it's a celebration, a spiritual exercise, or just sheer boredom, no one knows. But it's oddly calming until someone decides to argue about olives again. You watch the drama unfold from the safety of your bench. A tall man with one sandal stands and declares loudly that green olives are for cowards. Another counters that black olives are an insult to Saturn. A third insists both are inferior to capers. It escalates quickly. Raised voices, wide schistures, oil-slick arms pointing angrily at nothing in particular. Bathhouse arguments were a common Roman pastime. Here, in this sweltering cauldron of humanity, disagreements were expected, welcomed. Even, the idea was that the hot air cleansed not only the body, but the mind, boiling bad thoughts to the surface where they could be fought over and forgotten. You're not sure if it works, but the shouting at least provides a break from your own slowly melting thoughts. A man beside you leans over and whispers conspiratorially. This happens every third day. Same men. Some olives. Then he leans back and continues to peel a fig with his thumbnail. Like, this is just a mid-bath snack in the world's sweatiest kitchen. You start to feel dizzy. Not dangerously so, but enough to make standing feel like a major life decision. You watch your own skin shimmer with sweat and oil, glistening under the flickering light from a distant flame. If you didn't know better, you'd say you looked divine, or like a rotisserie chicken. Another man walks in, this one wearing what looks like a fur collar. In the caldarium. Bold choice. He surveys the room like he owns it, then slips into a recessed pool near the far wall, with a sigh so exaggerated it could be a one-man play. Someone hands him a strigil, shaped like a sea serpent. He begins scraping his legs with the grace of someone who's done this every day since birth. You, on the other hand, are done. You stand slowly, carefully, and make your way toward the exit. The heat follows you, clinging to your back like a damp cloak. A woman brushes past, her arms full of herbs, and mutters something about the steam being too thin today. You're not sure what that means, but you nod like you agree. As you step out into the relatively cooler air of the tepidarium, it feels like stepping onto an alpine mountaintop. You gulp it down, aware now of how close the caldarium came to boiling you alive. You wipe your face. The towel squeaks, and still, you look back once. The caldarium glows, a foggy, humid, glistening world where people sweat out their frustrations, argue about produce, chant for reasons lost to time, and scrape themselves into shining examples of civilization, or so they claim. You may not be cleaner, you may not be wiser, but you are officially part of something timeless and strange, and you're only halfway through the whole bath circuit. You follow a narrow corridor that spirals downward, the stones beneath your feet growing warmer with each careful step. A faint red glow pulses from below like the heartbeat of the bathhouse itself. The humidity sharpens into something elsidry heat laced with smoke, ash, and the distinct, nose-prickling tang of hard labor. This isn't for guests. This is behind the curtain. Welcome to the Praefernium, the underbelly of the bathhouse, where the heat is born. Most bathers never see this place. Why would they? It smells like scorched sandals and exhausted breath, and it sounds like a forge crossed with a riot. But you're curious. And that's how you find yourself crouched in the dark passage that leads to the engine room of Rome's bathhouse empire. You squint through the smoke. Down here, slaves tend the fires. Young, muscular, shirtless, smeared head to toe in soot and sweat, they move with a mechanical rhythm. One shovels endless logs into a roaring furnace. Another pulls ash from a trough with practiced drags of a long-handled rake. A third hauls water from a cistern, arms trembling under the weight. Their faces shine, not with oil like yours, but with labor, and maybe a bit of resignation. The Romans called this furnace the hypocaustum, the source of the hypocaust system that heated the floors and walls of the baths above. It's ingenious. Really, heat circulates under raised floors and inside hollow bricks within the walls, warming each chamber at just the right temperature. But what the elegant mosaics upstairs don't show is the roaring, smoky, downright dangerous world underneath that makes it all happen. You try to stay out of the way, stepping lightly across packed earth and half-burned charcoal. The floor is hot enough that your soles sting. In some areas, the tiles above are so thin, a misstep could crack them. You glance up at the ceiling and wonder if anyone ever fell through mid-soak. Historians still argue whether bathhouse floor collapses were common or merely rare tragedies whispered about by trembling masseurs. You step aside as a boy, maybe 12, rushes past, carrying a bundle of kindling. He barely notices you. His face is flushed, lips cracked from the dry heat. The furnace groans louder now, like it's hungry again. It always is. Bathhouse slaves lived rough lives. Their work was brutal, unending, and often invisible. Some were born into it. Others were prisoners of war or sold by desperate families. Once assigned to a bathhouse, their days became one long smoky marathon, stoke, rake, howl, repeat. Breaks were rare. Food was minimal. Sleep. A rumor. You feel the ache of it in your knees just watching them. One man, older than the others, seems to be in charge. He's missing part of an ear and carries a poker like a scepter. He barks instructions, shouts when the flames dip, and occasionally smacks a nearby beam in frustration. His skin has that overcooked leather look toughened by years of furnace glow. You try not to stare. He tries not to acknowledge your presence. There's a mutual understanding. You don't belong down here. You press forward, drawn by the architectural wonder of it all. The columns that support the raised floors are perfectly spaced. Stacked bricks, with just enough room between them for the hot air to swirl. The precision is astounding engineering ahead of its time. Still, you notice a few wobbly stacks. One corner appear damp. Mold? A leak from above? Either way, you wouldn't linger. In the far corner, another worker opens a small door in the wall, revealing a narrow channel where water trickles toward the caldarium pools. It's part of the heating circuit. As it passes through the stone, the water absorbs the inferno's warmth and arrives upstairs piping hot. You watch, fascinated, as steam curls lazily from the opening, carrying whispers of the bathers above. And here's a morbid thought. Some of the bathhouse slaves have never even seen the caldarium, never bathed in it. They live in the heat, create the comfort, but remain strangers to it. They know its warmth only as suffering. You feel a strange guilt rising in your throat. You, up there gleaming like a pampered sausage. And them, down here feeding the beast. One of the younger workers spots you and grins crookedly. He reaches into a cloth bundle and pulls out a small carved figure in ivory Venus. Worn smooth. He holds it up proudly before tucking it back into his tunic. You nod. It's his private shrine. Probably the only beauty in his furnace-lit world. The heat is becoming unbearable. Your own sweat is no longer from steam baths and massages, but the raw radiation of these furnaces. Your towel sticks to your neck like a wet rag. From Tartarus, you wipe your face and realize your fingers are covered in soot. Another bucket is dumped into the ash pit, and a cloud billows up. You cough, doubling over as the charcoal stings your lungs. One of the workers smirks, not used to real heat. He says in Latin laced with sarcasm. You manage a nod, grateful your voice has momentarily abandoned you. You glance once more around the dim, glowing chamber. The rhythm of it all is weirdly soothing, like the heartbeat of an old god. Labor, fire, sweat, repeat. But you know you can't stay here long. This place is not for bathers. It's for the forgotten. Climbing back up the corridor. Your legs heavy and your throat dry. You return to the main floor with a renewed appreciation for the warmth beneath your feet. That perfect, gentle heat of the caldarium, it's born of blistered hands and half-burnt logs, of men who work in the dark to keep you glowing. Back in the apodyterium, someone is complaining that the water wasn't quite hot enough today. You suppress a laugh. If only they knew. You lower yourself onto a bench, scrape some soot off your forearm, and realize that, somehow, you've gone from polished bather to honorary furnace goblin in less than 15 minutes. Your hair smells like charcoal. Your skin itches. But your mind is buzzing. Rome builds empires on the backs of the invisible. And here in the bathhouse, beneath the mosaics and perfume, that truth is burning, always burning just beneath your feet. You sit there for a moment longer, your skin cooling just enough to start feeling itchy, like your pores aren't sure what to do after being steamed from above and smoked from below. The air still vibrates faintly from the furnaces you just left behind. Your mind, half fogged from heat and soot, wanders toward something a bather once mentioned in passing, something about how the floor bit him. You assumed it was a joke? Now, you're not so sure. It's time to move again. You stand and head back into the warmer zones, tracing your steps past sweaty shoulders, piles of tunics, and stray oil flasks. But instead of returning to the main pool, you veer left into a room paved with something strange underfoot. It's warm, too warm, and then it clicks. This is one of the hypocaust floors. To the untrained eye, it looks like any other tile. A wide stretch of stone with decorative mosaics and glowing torches licking the walls. But below your feet is a cavity of fire and fury. A hidden space where hot air roams like a ghost, heating the stone beneath your soles to just barely tolerable temperatures until it isn't. You take a few more steps and feel a sharp, sudden sting in your heel. Not enough to yelp, but enough to wince. The floor's hotter in this section. You look around and see other bathers shifting awkwardly, tiptoeing from one foot to the other, like dancers trying to hide. They're in pain. One man picks up a sandal, sniffs it, frowns, and then puts it on only one foot. Half protection is better than none. The hypocaust system, as marvelous as it is, doesn't exactly offer even heat distribution. The Romans were geniuses. Sure, but precise thermostats weren't part of the deal. You've heard of accidents happening, tile cracking, plaster melting, entire sections buckling under excessive heat. Historians still debate whether this was rare engineering failure or just an accepted occupational hazard. You shuffle across a line of cooler tiles, trying not to step too close to the walls, where the vertical heating flues pump warmth up like miniature chimneys. You pause at the far end of the room, noticing a small pile of what looks like blackened tiles stacked carefully in the corner. Replacements, maybe, or casualties nearby. A young man with sweat pouring off his nose like a dripping faucet suddenly slips and lands with a squelchy thud. Everyone gasps, but no one rushes to help. He lies there for a second, face down on the tile, before groaning. "I'm fine, just cooking." He gets up with a sheepish grin and a patch of red forming on his shoulder. You consider offering your towel? Then remember, it's mostly soot at this point. There's a constant tension here between marvel and menace. You glance up at the walls, decorated with scenes of Neptune and dolphins leaping through foamy waves. The artistry is impressive, but it feels out of place in a room where a poorly timed sneeze could turn your foot into a panini. A group of workers enters through a side door, carrying tool chisels, plaster, a stack of new tiles. One begins tapping the floor with a long-handled rod. Listening to the sound it makes, a solid thud means the tile is seated properly. A hollow ring? Trouble. They mark a few tiles with chalk and begin chiseling carefully. Another worker mutters something about a soft spot near the west wall. You sidestep quickly. Suddenly, a loud pop echoes from across the room, followed by a thin wisp of steam rising between the tiles. One of the workers groans. "Again?" he says, clearly exasperated. They gather around the area, whispering in frustration. The heat has warped something again. Someone yokes. Maybe the gods want a new floor. No one laughs. You're ushered away. Politely. Repair zones are no place for delicate bather sand sent into the next room, which is thankfully cooler. Your feet are grateful. Your nerves, however, remain slightly frayed. And then, out of the corner of your eye, you see it, a scar in the mosaic. A crack, spidering out from the corner of a Neptune mural. Small, barely visible, but telling. You remember hearing of bathhouses where sections of floor collapsed into the hypocaust beneath, dropping unsuspecting bathers into furnace-blasted voids. No fatalities recorded officially, but one look at that crack, and your mind paints vivid images of someone sliding through it like a piece of bread into a toaster. You're starting to understand that beauty, in Rome, is often just a thin veneer over danger. As you step into another tepid chamber, you catch snippets of a conversation between two elderly men massaging each other's shoulders while balancing cups of watered wine. Last week, one says, "A boy fell through a tile in Capua." The other nods sagely. "They pulled him out like a roast chickpea." You smile awkwardly and try not to picture it. A boy walks by, carrying a replacement tile over one shoulder. The design only half painted. It's a crude dolphin, missing an eye. "New one for the frigidarium?" he says to no one in particular. You watch him go, realizing how often things must break around here and how quickly they must be patched up to keep up the illusion of perfection. It dawns on you that the baths are constantly falling apart in endless cycle of cracking, patching, reheating, rebuilding. Like Rome itself, always glorious, always crumbling, always pretending it isn't. You lean against a wall, careful to avoid the warm spots, and wipe the back of your neck with your crusty towel. Someone offers you a fresh splash of oil. You politely decline. Your pores are staging a protest. As the day stretches on, you notice fewer people moving around. Some are napping in corners, curled on stone benches like oily cats. Others are simply sitting in silence, their eyes half-lidded, drifting into bathhouse limbo. You almost envy them. Then, a loud clang rings out. A worker, dropping a tile. It bounces once, twice, and shatters. Everyone jumps. One woman shrieks. A few men laugh nervously. The worker winces and starts sweeping the shards with a bundle of reeds. No one offers to help. This, too, is normal. You sit again. This time, with your back against a cooler patch of mosaic. And think about the hypocaust below you. A miracle and a menace. The fires that warm your toes and threaten to melt them. The slaves who shovel endlessly while you sweat in blissful ignorance. You close your eyes and feel the rumble underfoot. The fires are still going. Always going. And you're just one heartbeat away from joining them. You're rubbing a mysterious red spot on your heel courtesy of that rogue overheated tile when a sudden shriek rings out from the far end of the tepidarium. Not the kind of scream that signals danger. No. This is a scream of outrage. Of disbelief. Possibly of soap theft. You crane your neck just in time to see a man clutching a nearly empty oil flask and waving it in the air like a gladiator's trophy. Stolen, he bellows. Someone's taken my best unguent. His other hand, still gleaming with leftover oil, points accusingly at everyone and no one. Nearby bathers shuffle uncomfortably, pretending to fall deeply into their own towels. Another bather, reclining like a sated lizard, opens one eye and says, "It's probably the same person who pinched my strigil last week." There's a general murmur of agreement. You hear someone whisper, "It's that kid again. The one with the lazy eye and the fast hands." No one seems surprised. Welcome to one of Rome's lesser documented truths. The bathhouse is a battlefield. For all their pomp and engineered splendor, Roman baths were far from peaceful, with hundreds, sometimes thousands of sweaty, nearly naked bodies milling around, slipping on tiles, dropping personal items, and getting lost in clouds of steam. Things went missing. Oil flasks, towels, strigils, sandals, even togas. Some losses were accidental. Most verent, you shift your weight and subtly pat your own oil flask. Now tucked carefully into the fold of your towel, like a precious gem. You are not losing it. Not after last time. A woman beside you nudges her neighbor and whispers, "Someone tried to sell me my own flask last week. Said it had divine fragrance." Her neighbor snorts. "Smelled like goat?" Oh, theft in Roman baths was so common that wall curses' actual inscriptions have been found scrawled beside mosaics. You remember one particularly salty example you saw earlier in the latrines. "To the thief who took my sandals, may your feet be forever blistered. And may the gods guide your steps into goat droppings." Historians still argue whether this kind of theft was rampant or just exaggerated in surviving records. But you're starting to believe it. Right now, a pair of boys are crouched by the oil tray, whispering and giggling, casually swapping flasks like trading cards. One glances over and immediately stashes something behind a column. You narrow your eyes but say nothing. Snitching in the baths is not a wise path, and the thefts aren't limited to objects. No. Sometimes it's personal space. Dignity. Even your place in line. You step forward toward the massage corner and are immediately shoulder-checked by a man covered in a suspicious amount of lavender oil. He glances at you once, then flops down on the slab as if born to it. You stare. He shrugs. "First come, first serve," he says, knowing full well that's not how it works. You consider arguing, Then remember the olive dispute from earlier and think better of it. Massage time, when it arrives, is supposed to be the relaxing cherry on top of your multi-hour exfoliation journey. But here, it's more like Russian roulette with elbows. The masseurs usually, slaves trained in anatomy and indifference stand, ready with knotted hands and even knottier expressions. You lay down, keeping one eye half open just in case someone tries to snatch your strigil again. Your masseur is a wiry man with calloused hands and a voice like gravel. He doesn't introduce himself. He just starts. Thumb to your shoulder blade, fist to your lower back. At one point, he uses what feels suspiciously like a knee to adjust your spine. You wince. He grunts in approval. You've got bad bile. He says, too much wind in your ribs. Oh, you want to ask what that means. But he's already slapping your kidneys with both palms, like he's tenderizing a chicken. You try to relax. Breathe. Ignore the couple arguing two slabs over about who left the wineskin in the tepidarium. But the chaos doesn't stop. Another bather shouts that his sandals have mysteriously shrunk. Someone else insists the fig vendor outside is watering down the wine. A skinny teenager tries to sneak away with a towel twice his size and is promptly chased by an angry older man who flings a sandal at his head. It misses. Barely. The masseur slaps your shoulder one last time and mutters, there. Balanced. You're not sure what's been balanced. But you're upright again and slightly wobbly, like a freshly chiseled statue, still adjusting to its pedestal. You stumble toward a corner bench, eager to escape the action. But there's no such thing in a Roman bathhouse. A man beside you is recounting how a lover once stole his tunic during a particularly steamy soak, leaving him to walk home in nothing but shame and one damp sandal. Best week of my life. He concludes with a nostalgic sigh. You pretend to be fascinated by the ceiling. To your right, two women are deep in a hushed conversation about someone's scandalous exit from the frigidarium earlier. She didn't even rinse first. One says, scandalized. The other gasps. And in front of the centurion's wife, you don't ask questions. Some stories are best left half-heard. You glance down at your own belongings. Somehow, your towel is now folded differently. Was it moved, touched, replaced entirely with an identical but slightly inferior version? You can't prove anything. But you don't trust it anymore. You drape it across your knee protectively and start eyeing everyone like they're all potential sandal thieves. The paranoia is contagious. By now, you've learned the unwritten rules. Never leave anything unattended for more than 10 seconds. Never assume the oil tray is communal. And above all, if you value it, keep it either on your person or in your sight. Even then, there's no guarantee. The bathhouse is a theater of petty crime. And everyone's a possible actor. As you prepare to leave the chamber, someone shouts, "Found it?" A man lifts a strigil triumphantly from behind a marble bench. I knew someone took it. The crowd doesn't react. Another man immediately mutters, "Check if it's still yours." He flips it over and pauses. Different scratch. West. A replacement planted to throw him off. Diabolical. You duck past the chaos and head toward the exit archway. Your flask gripped tight. Your towel clutched like a lifeline. Someone jostles you on the way out. You turn to look no apology, but your flask is still there. Maybe. You're not entirely sure anymore. You're lying flat on your stomach, palms pressed firmly against the cool, slightly damp marble slab, waiting for whatever's next to happen. The masseur towers above you, hands hovering like a hawk, preparing to strike. You take a deep breath and brace yourself not for a gentle spa rub, but for something closer to a gladiator's rough warm-up. Mixed with the occasional fleeting tenderness, his fingers dig into your back with surprising strength and precision. Kneading muscles you didn't realize you even had long since forgotten were sore. The ache that blossoms is dull but persistent, spreading slowly like a fire under your skin. A mix of discomfort and relief. Like stepping on a Lego, except somehow it feels strangely good. In ancient Rome, massage wasn't merely a luxury reserved for the pampered elite. It was practical therapy. Wrestlers, soldiers, laborers, anyone who relied on their body to get through the day needed the firm, expert hands of a masseur to keep moving. Even senators, those masters of rhetoric and debate, often sought relief in the hands of skilled attendants who could knead away the tensions of political life and late-night feasts. Your masseur's technique is unorthodox, to say the least. He speaks sparingly, muttering short Latin phrases here and there, as if chanting an incantation. Tight here, he grunts, hammering your shoulder blade with a strong thumb. Must loosen. Then, without warning, he presses his elbow deep into your calves. You feel a crack, whether it's bones or pride. You're not sure, but you grit your teeth and endure. This is no gentle pampering. It's a full-on conquest of your muscles. You try to keep your face neutral, even though part of you wants to flinch. Roman bathhouse massages were not for the faint-hearted. That's for sure. Nearby, a woman receives a far gentler treatment. Her masseur's hands glide over her skin with soft, rhythmic strokes, accompanied by quiet whistles. You watch her close her eyes and melt into relaxation, envying her ease. Your masseur, by contrast, treats your body as a battlefield, something to be tamed, kneaded, and subdued. He frequently glances around nervously, eyes darting through the steam and shadows. The bathhouse, after all, is as much a den of thieves and opportunists as it is a place for scrubbing and soaking. Careless bathers lose more than just dirt here. Pickpockets thrive amid the distraction of massages and steam. You recall stories of massages gone awry, attendants growing too familiar with their guests, crossing lines, or slipping hands into purses and tunics. Some patrons even hired their own guards to watch over their belongings while being rubbed down. You're grateful you didn't. Despite the marble walls and thick steam softening the noise, the bathhouse hums with life-heated conversations about politics, gossip from gladiator arenas, disputes over the best olive oil for cooking and cosmetics. Suddenly, a loud splash disrupts the chatter. Someone has jumped into a pool, or maybe slipped, and the room ripples with amused shouts and laughter. Your masseur pauses his work to glance at your strigil lying nearby, running a fingertip over its edge. Could be sharper, he mutters knowingly. You nod, unsure what to say. He gives you a half-smile that suggests he knows things about these tools you don't. The massage continues. Sharp pokes, deep presses, and occasional rough strokes. Somewhere between agony and ecstasy, your muscles start to unwind despite the gruff treatment. Then, unexpectedly, he leans close and whispers. Balance is restored. You're not sure what he means exactly, but you nod politely and thank him anyway. You sit up slowly, muscles tingling. When laughter erupts nearby, two men are arguing over a missing oil flask, each accusing the other of hiding it in the frigidarium, the notorious cold plunge, famous for its slippery floors and apparently secret stashes. You shake your head in disbelief and towel yourself off. The bathhouse feels like a wild beast, part sanctuary, part circus, part battleground. You wonder how anyone keeps their sanity amid such chaos. As you make your way toward the exit, you pass a group of bathers sharing wine and figs. One raises a cup in your direction. You raise yours in return, grateful for the strange camaraderie in this messy, steamy world. Massage or mugging? Tonight? It's a little bit of both. You step out of the massage area feeling both tender and oddly energized. Your skin still slick with a mixture of oil and sweat. Just as you start to catch your breath, a bath attendant approaches, offering you a small vial of perfume. You take it hesitantly, the delicate floral scent contrasting sharply with the underlying aroma of damp stone, stale oil, and unwashed bodies that permeates the air. In ancient Rome, perfume wasn't merely decorative, it was essential. A social weapon designed to mask the less pleasant odors that clung stubbornly to bathers. You dab a bit of the perfume onto your wrists and neck, watching how the scent sharpens and softens with the heat swirling around you. Romans were deeply obsessed with fragrance, using everything from rose petals and myrtle to civet musk to scent their bodies, homes, and even their pets. Perfumers held high status, with their exotic concoctions traded across the empire as coveted treasures. Yet, the reality of the bathhouse was a sensory battlefield. No amount of perfume could fully compete with the cacophony of scents rising from the pools. The communal oil, the damp marble, and the occasional whiff drifting in from the nearby latrines. Historians still debate how effective these perfumes were, whether they truly improved personal hygiene or merely provided a thin veil to disguise inevitable smells. Catching your reflection in a cracked bronze mirror, you note the rosy flush on your cheeks, the frizzy dampness of your hair, and the oil sheen that still clings stubbornly to your skin. You look different, perhaps cleaner, though also weary. Nearby, a group of bathers exchanges small perfume bottles, their voices hushed, but dripping with gossip about the latest political scandal, or who had been caught sneaking into the women's bathing hours. You feel grateful to be a mere observer, spared the drama. Perfume was not just a personal indulgence, but a social statement. Some Romans wore so much fragrance that guests reportedly suffered headaches. Others believed perfume could ward off disease or attract lovers, making it a versatile accessory in the complex social dance of the baths. An elderly man nearby applies a thick, greenish paste behind his ears and down his neck. You watch with mild horror as it looks suspiciously like kitchen paste, supposedly a remedy to keep the skin supple and repel insects. You try not to grimace. The bathhouse is a riot of senses. The glint of oil, glazed skin under flickering torchlight, the tactile contrast of slippery stone and rough towels, the murmur of debates and laughter mixing with splashing water, and the heavy, intermingled smells that assault your nostrils It's overwhelming, yet oddly comforting in its chaotic normality. A young woman passes by, leaving a soft trail of lavender and honey scent in her wake. She offers you a faint smile, and you return Ita's silent acknowledgement of the shared vulnerability in this steamy, communal world. Bathing in Rome was never simply about cleanliness. It was a ritual that intertwined the physical with the social, binding strangers in steam, oil, and whispered secrets. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, you allow the perfume to settle, masking the day's grime and fatigue. In that moment, amidst the chaos and filth, beauty and ritual still endure. Sure, the bathhouse was a nightmare for hygiene, but in its own strange way, it was unforgettable for connection, for culture, for the messy, sweaty humanity of it all. You hesitate just outside the latrine area, the pungent air assaulting your nostrils like a slap from a wet fish. This isn't the kind of place anyone talks about over dinner. The smell hits you in layers sharp ammonia notes, hints of mildew, and something sour and souring that makes your stomach churn. Despite the stench, this was part of the Roman bathing experience. There was no separate bathroom. Instead, latrines lined the walls adjacent to the hot rooms and pools. The boundary between cleanliness and filth was, as always in Rome, thin and permeable. Your eyes adjust to the dimness as you step inside. The latrines are little more than a long row of stone seats, each with a carefully carved keyhole opening, perched side by side, with no dividers or privacy screens. You count at least a dozen of these cold stone thrones, all dripping with moisture from the damp air and the countless bodies that have sat there before. You try not to imagine how many 12. You pick an end spot, hoping for a little breathing room. But you're sandwiched between an elderly man humming a tuneless song and a scrawny teenager who's whistling tunelessly as he traces patterns in the dirt with his toes. It's the kind of forced camaraderie born from shared discomfort. And then your eye catches it. The infamous tersorium. There, in a shallow trough of murky water running beneath the seats, is a long wooden stick with a frayed, darkened sponge tied to one end. This communal sponge is the Roman answer to toilet paper. One sponge to be shared. Rinse it if you're lucky in water that might or might not have vinegar or salt. You stare at it, fascinated and horrified all at once. Historians still argue over the hygiene practices surrounding the tersorium. Some argue it was a practical, if unpleasant, solution, claiming vinegar was routinely added to disinfect the sponge and trough water. Others suggest it was little more than a cesspool, a breeding ground for parasites and disease. Given the putrid stench, you find yourself sympathizing with the latter theory. You imagine the grim parade of bathers dipping the sponge in turnoil-slicked skin, sweat, dirt, and God knows what else mingling in that shared wetness. The thought sends an involuntary shiver down your spine. You quickly resolve not to look too closely and hope for the best. Nearby, a young boy darts past, laughing wildly, nearly colliding with you. His carefree innocence is a stark contrast to the grim reality of the room. A slave mutters under his breath about children and chaos, but says nothing, allowing the boy to escape unscathed. You admire the resilience of youth. Your gaze drifts to the walls, and you're surprised by the layers of graffiti etched and painted on the stone. Here, Romans left their marks' names, dates, silly insults, and love notes scrawled alongside crude drawings and surprisingly explicit sketches. One scratched message curses the thief who stole a sandal, wishing a lifetime of itchy feet. Another proclaims eternal love for a sweetest juice seller. The bathroom here doubles as a canvas for Roman humor, frustration, and community expression. You pause to trace an oddly detailed drawing of a reclining nude, arms crossed over its chest with a mischievous grin. You wonder who the artist was and how many others have admired this little piece of bathroom art over the centuries. Amid the graffiti, a serious inscription catches your eye, a warning written in bold letters. He who steals from the baths invites the wrath of the gods. Theft was a real concern here. People left their oil flasks, sandals, towels, and even strigils unattended at times, and some never saw them again. The baths were a hive of petty crime, and curses served as their only defense. You glance down at your own belongings, suddenly feeling protective of your slightly worn towel and flask of oil. You tuck them closer, an instinct you hadn't felt before entering this room. Just then, you notice an elderly man sitting quietly near the far wall, reading a scroll with delicate care. His brow furrows as he scans lines of Latin script, occasionally muttering about tax assessments or legal disputes. The juxtaposition is surreal here. In a room devoted to human waste and communal vulnerability, someone is conducting what might be serious business. It's a reminder of how blurred the lines between public and private life were in ancient Rome. No corner of daily existence was truly separate. You imagine the conversations that must have happened here: politicians, merchants, slaves, and senators all sharing this intimate space. Forced into an unspoken truce by proximity and necessity, you try to steady your breath, the damp chill of the stone seat creeping through your skin. You resist the urge to touch the sponge, instead dipping your hand quickly in a nearby basin with water that smells faintly of herbs and something less identifiable. You dry your hands on your towel, now damp and slightly threadbare. The cacophony outside the latrines is a welcome relief, the warm hum of the tepidarium, laughter, the splash of water from pools, the murmur of conversations in dozens of tongues. Returning there feels like stepping from a grim dungeon into a lively marketplace, but the memory of the tersorium lingers like a shadow. It's an uncomfortable symbol of shared vulnerability, a reminder that Roman communal life was a messy, intimate affair where personal boundaries often blurred. Here, the ancient pursuit of cleanliness collided with practical realities, forcing people into close contact with the less savory aspects of human existence. You shudder, but can't help a grudging respect for the Romans' ingenuity and resilience. Despite the hygiene nightmare, they built these bathhouses as centers of culture, health, and social life. The tersorium may have been unpleasant, but it was part of a larger system that shaped how Romans lived and connected. You step away, eager to leave the latrines behind, but with the sponge's image burned into your mind. It's a grotesque yet powerful reminder that even the most civilized societies wrestle with the basics of survival and sanitation. As you rejoin the warm embrace of the bath steam and chatter, you find yourself oddly grateful for the experience. It was disgusting, yes, but unforgettable. And, In the end, that's what Roman bathing was all about. Enduring discomfort to partake in a ritual that bound a civilization together in sweat, gossip, and shared humanity. You step carefully down the worn marble stairs into the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, and almost immediately your skin screams in protest. The water is shockingly chilly, biting into your flesh like shards of ice. The air here is noticeably cooler, less heavy with steam, but it carries its own sharp freshness that fills your lungs and pries open your senses. You gasp involuntarily, your breath catching as the cold steals the warmth from your soaked skin. It's a bracing contrast to the caldarium's oppressive heat, and you find yourself wondering if the ancient Romans invented this cycle of extremes not just for cleanliness, but as a kind of tester ritual to prove resilience and toughness. You plunge deeper, the water swirling around your calves and thighs, the cold seeping into your bones and forcing your heart to beat faster. Bathers around you tread cautiously. Some just dip their toes or splash water on their faces, while others submerge fully, holding their breath and gritting their teeth against the biting cold. A few laugh loudly, encouraging each other to stay longer, to brave the chill like true Romans. The frigidarium was the final stage in the classic Roman bathing sequence. After the steamy warm room and the scalding hot caldarium, it was said to close the pores opened by the heat, helping to seal the body and preserve health. Medical writers of the time debated its benefits. Some praised the invigorating shock for improving circulation and vitality, while others cautioned that too sudden a cold plunge after heat exposure could cause fainting, muscle cramps, or worse. You find yourself wondering which side you're on as the cold presses into your chest and makes your muscles tighten involuntarily. Despite the discomfort, there's something exhilarating about the frigidarium and icy baptism that leaves you feeling cleansed in a way the hot baths never quite achieved. Across the pool, a group of young men have taken to playing a gamesome kind of race underwater challenge. They take turns diving, holding their breath as long as possible, then popping up, gasping and laughing. One boy boasts he managed a full minute underwater, eliciting cheers and mock disbelief from the others. The competitive energy is infectious, and you can't help but smile at the timelessness of youthful bravado. Nearby, an older woman with intricately braided hair adjusts her sandals and surveys the room, like a seasoned general assessing the field. Her sharp eyes flick between bathers, noting who is daring enough to remain submerged and who is timidly retreating to the warmer edges. Bathhouses weren't just about bathing. They were theaters of social observation and silent judgment. You swim slowly toward the steps, feeling your muscles twitch in the cold water. The scent of oil and sweat is faint here, replaced by the clean, almost biting smell of fresh water, mingled with a hint of moss and wet stone. You take a deep breath, feeling the cold sharpen your senses and revive your weary spirit. A small child races past, splashing wildly, chased by a barefoot slave, trying not to smile. The chaos and joy remind you that amid all the rituals and rules, the baths were places of play and human connection. Children's laughter mingled with the low hum of conversation and the gentle splash of water. Climbing out, your skin tingling with cold, you wrap your towel around yourself and look around. The bathhouse feels different now, less a nightmare and more a vibrant ecosystem of sound, smell, and movement. It is a place where the ancient and the visceral collide. You take a moment to appreciate the mosaic floors under flickering torchlight tiny stones, arranged in swirling patterns that gleam like wet jewels. The vaulted ceilings above catch echoes of distant laughter and the drip of water from fountains. The scents swirl a blend of perfumes, damp stone, oil, and the faintest trace of incense. Everywhere you look, you see life unfolding, men lounging in heated seats, women exchanging gossip wrapped in fragrant oils, slaves hustling with buckets of water and clean towels, musicians playing soft tunes near the paliestra. The bathhouse is a microcosm of Rome itself, a melting pot of classes, personalities, and stories. As you move toward the next chamber, the heat of the caldarium calls to you again, but this time with a different feelingless dread and more familiarity. You realize that no matter how nightmarish parts of the experience might have been, it's undeniably Roman, a complex blend of pleasure, pain, social, ritual, and raw humanity. Bathing here isn't just about cleansing the body. It's about immersing yourself in a world where every splash, every whispered conversation, and every heated debate becomes part of a grand shared story that's lasted millennia. You take a deep breath, the cool air of the frigidarium still clinging to your skin, and step forward ready to face whatever the baths throw at you next. You find yourself wandering into the women's section of the bathhouse, a place whispered about and half mythologized by the men who never dared cross its threshold. The ladies-only hours are sacrosanct, a space where Roman women could bathe without the prying eyes of senators or gladiators. The atmosphere is different here, softer, quieter, but no less intense in its rituals and dramas. As you step inside, the scent changes immediately. Gone is the sharp tang of sweat and oil. Instead, you're enveloped in layers of floral perfumes, leonor, rosewater, and something warm and spicy, perhaps cinnamon or myrrh. The air is thick with steam, but the mood is gentler, more intimate. Women move gracefully from pool to pool, their skin glistening with oils and lotions, their voices low but animated with gossip and laughter. You notice elaborate hairstyles, adorned with pins and jewels, some braided so tightly they might as well be armor. Jewelry glints on wrists and necks, a subtle display of wealth and status. Even in this steamy sanctuary, the architecture here feels more delicate, with arches softened by hanging vines and mosaic tiles in pastel colors. Frescoes depict goddesses and nymphs, celebrating feminine beauty and power. It's clear this section was designed to be a Havana refuge from the harshness of the outside world and, sometimes, from the male-dominated spaces of the larger baths. You observe a group of older women seated together, exchanging stories and advice. They speak in hushed tones about marriages, children, and the ever-changing politics of Rome's elite families. One leans in to whisper about a scandal involving a senator's wife and a young poet. You can't help but be drawn into their circle, imagining the stories behind their words. Historians still debate the exact nature of women's bathing in Rome. Some suggest the baths were fully mixed, with men and women bathing together, while others insist on strict separation. The truth likely varied by city, bathhouse, and time period. What's certain is that for many women, the baths offered a rare opportunity for socializing, relaxation, and even political influence. Nearby, a young mother tends to her child, gently washing the little one's feet. While chatting with a friend, the child squirms and giggles, splashing water everywhere. It's a reminder that despite the formality, the baths were lived-in places of life, messiness, and human connection. You notice the presence of slaves here as well. Some assisting with oil application, others carrying water or towels. Their expressions range from weary to watchful. You wonder about their live show, much freedom, if any, they found in this world of polished marble and perfumed air. One woman approaches, offering you a small cup of honey-sweetened wine. You accept, grateful for the gesture of hospitality. The drink is warm and fragrant, a perfect companion to the steamy surroundings. You sip slowly, letting the sweetness balance the heat on your skin. A soft murmur rises as a woman begins reciting poetry. Her voice is melodic, weaving tales of love, loss, and the gods. Around you, heads nod in appreciation. Poetry was a cherished part of Roman culture, and the baths were often stages for such performances, whether planned or spontaneous. You glance toward the pools. Some women are dipping in quietly, eyes closed in meditation or prayer. Others splash playfully, their laughter ringing like bells. The pools themselves are smaller and more intricately decorated than those in the men's sections, with mosaics depicting aquatic scenes and mythological creatures. You're struck by the contrast. This is a space of both vulnerability and power, where the rituals of bathing blend with the politics of femininity. Bathing here isn't just about physical cleanliness. It's a performance, a declaration of identity, and a negotiation of social standing. As the afternoon wanes, the light filters through small, stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the tiled floors. The atmosphere shifts toward quiet reflection. Women wrap themselves in soft linen robes, smoothing their hair and adjusting their jewelry. Conversations grow softer, more intimate. You feel a deep sense of calm wash over you. Despite the earlier chaos of the baths, there's something profoundly human about this shared space, a reminder that even in an empire of power and conquest, moments of gentleness and community endure. You gather your belongings, your skin still warm and fragrant from oils and perfumes. As you prepare to leave the women's section, you pause one last time to take in the steamy, soft chatter, the glistening pools, the radiant faces, the Roman baths, for all their nightmarish moments, hold a complex beauty, a world where cleanliness, culture, and connection intertwine in steam and stone. You step back into the wider bathhouse, ready to continue your journey through this ancient, unforgettable ritual. You linger a moment at the threshold of the grand imperial baths, the baths of Caracalla, an architectural marvel that both dazzles and overwhelms. Imagine a sprawling complex, bigger than several city blocks, with towering vaulted ceilings, intricate mosaics glistening under the golden sunlight filtering through the windows, and vast pools, so large they feel like miniature lakes. This is the apex of Roman bathing culture, a palace of steam, stone, and spectacle. As you step inside, the scale of the place immediately hits you. The marble floors stretch endlessly, The columns soar skyward, each decorated with ornate capitals and carvings that seem to whisper stories of gods and emperors. Water flows constantly, fed by an engineering marvel of aqueducts and underground pipes. The air is thick with steam, oil, and the unmistakable buzz of 1,000 voices. Mingling, you move through the vast halls, eyes drinking in frescoes that depict mythical scenes, Neptune commanding the seas, Venus rising from the foam, Hercules battling his foes. The walls themselves seem alive with color and life, though faded by centuries. Beneath your feet, the mosaics tell tales of fish, dolphins, and sea monsters, their tiny tesserae worn smooth by countless footsteps. The baths of Caracalla were more than just places to bathe. They were social hubs, political stages, and symbols of imperial grandeur. They could host thousands at once, offering everything from hot and cold pools to gymnasiums, libraries, and gardens. You sense that here, bathing was an event, a statement of Rome's power and sophistication. Yet beneath the grandeur, the familiar smells and textures emerge. The sharp tang of stale oil, the damp chill of stone benches, the occasional whiff of something less savory drifting from the latrines. The baths, for all their beauty, were not immune to the challenges of hygiene. Water wasn't changed frequently. Many bathers soaked in the same pools, sharing the invisible cargo of bacteria and skin cells. You think of the common cold, skin infections, and parasites that likely spread here unchecked. Historians still argue how effective the bath sanitation systems truly were. Some point to the sophisticated plumbing as evidence of advanced hygiene, while others suggest the sheer volume of users overwhelmed the technology, making these places as much a health hazard as a spa. You watch as slaves move quietly through the corridors, hauling buckets of fresh water, scrubbing floors, and tending to the fires that heat the water. Their faces are a contrast to the opulence marked by exhaustion and soot, eyes wary and distant. You wonder how many of them ever set foot in the bathing halls as guests, rather than workers. The social dynamics are on full display. Senators, in fine robes, stroll beside merchants and soldiers. Philosophers debate near the exercise yards, while courtesans weave through the crowd, exchanging flirtatious glances and sharp barbs. The baths are a melting pot, where status is both displayed and challenged, where alliances are forged in steam and oil. You're drawn to the Palaestra, the open courtyard where athletes train. The air here hums with exertion, the slap of sandals on stone, the grunts of men wrestling, the clash of wooden swords. It's a reminder that the baths were not just for relaxation, but for cultivating strength and discipline. Nearby, a crowd gathers around a performer, juggling oil flasks, eliciting laughter and applause. Even in this grand setting, the mix of high culture and low entertainment persists. You decide to enter one of the larger pools, the water inviting despite its shared nature. As you wade in, you feel the familiar, oily slick beneath your skin and the subtle presence of others in the water. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the emperors and citizens who have soaked here before you. Despite the marvels, the baths of Caracalla were not immune to danger. The immense structure required constant maintenance. Walls cracked, pipes burst, and fires sometimes broke out. You imagine the chaos when a pool drained unexpectedly or a floor gave way beneath unsuspecting bathers. The risk was part of the experience, a thrilling edge beneath the grandeur. You move toward a Keter corner, where a library once stood. Books and scrolls were housed here, offering knowledge amid the steam and sweat. Scholars and students frequented the baths, blending intellectual pursuits with physical cleansing. You pose, wondering what secrets the ancient texts held and how much of that wisdom has been lost to time. Outside, the gardens offer a reprieve from the marble and moisture. You imagine lounging among fragrant herbs and flowering shrubs, the sound of fountains mingling with birdsong. The baths were designed as holistic retreats, nurturing body, mind, and spirit. As you prepare to leave, you take one last look around the magnificent halls. The baths of Caracalla embody the paradox of Roman bathing, stunning beauty and grandeur layered over the grime, noise, and chaos of daily life. They are monuments to an empire that valued both spectacle and social ritual. Even if cleanliness was sometimes sacrificed for show, you step back into the sunlight. The cool breeze, a welcome contrast to the humid air inside. The baths have left their mark on your skin, your senses, and your understanding of a civilization that bathed, argued, and lived beneath the weight of marble arches and the shadows of emperors. You pick up a rough piece of volcanic rock from the side of the bathhouse courtyard, feeling its gritty surface against your fingers. This is pumice, natural exfoliant, prized by Romans for scrubbing away the stubborn layers of oil, sweat, and dirt that clung to their skin. It's hard to imagine now, but this rough stone was their version of a fancy facial scrub or body polish. You wonder how many ancient Romans winced or cackled in pain while rubbing pumice across their elbows and knees. As you begin to rub the pumice over your arms, you realize it's far more abrasive than you expected. Teeny grains scrape against your skin, slowly peeling off dead cells, but also leaving red marks in some places. You pause to catch your breath and wonder if this was really better than just staying oily and slippery. Romans believed that physical beauty and hygiene were intertwined, but they weren't gentle about it. The vigorous scrubbing with pumice was part of the ritual of transformation from grimy, sweaty citizen to gleaming, presentable member of society. It was a tough love kind of cleanliness, one that required patience and a good sense of humor. Historians still argue whether pumice was widely used by all classes or mostly reserved for the wealthy. Some evidence suggests the poor had less access to these luxury items, instead relying on sand or even ash to scrub themselves. You can't help but sympathize with anyone who ever tried to clean their skin with abrasive volcanic rock after a long day of hard labor. Nearby, a woman is expertly wielding a pumice stone on her feet, her face serene despite the scrubbing. Her toes glisten with oil and sweat, and she smiles knowingly at you as if to say, "Welcome to the party." You smile back, appreciating the unspoken camaraderie of shared discomfort. You notice that pumice stones came in all shapes and sizes, some shaped like eggs, others flattened or even carved into decorative forms. Owning a particularly fine pumice could be a point of pride, like carrying a personalized comb or a favorite strigil. Some bathhouses even had dedicated pumice scrubbing attendants who would offer their services to clients who preferred not to do the work themselves. You imagine the social dynamics this created. Did clients bond over the pain? Did masseurs compete for the title of Best Pumice Scraper? You can almost hear the jokes exchanged over a freshly scrubbed calf. Careful, or you'll be as smooth as a senator's togas. The bathhouse humor was alive and well. As you continue scrubbing, you become aware of the little injuries pumice can cause. Tiny cuts on elbows and knees sting when they meet water or oil. A patch on your ankle starts to bleed faintly. You grimace but press on. This is part of the price of Roman cleanliness pain traded for polish. You pause to rinse your hands in a basin of water, watching as dead skin flakes swirl away. The water is murky, mixed with oil and sweat from previous bathers. It reminds you how communal the baths really were, and how cleanliness was sometimes more about ritual than actual hygiene. Nearby, a group of teenagers are comparing pumice stones, boasting about which one got the smoothest results. One boy claims his was a gift from a gladiator and has special powers. Another insists his pumice is cursed but works wonders. The banter is light-hearted, but fierce another game in the complex social dance of the baths. You take a moment to observe a strange ritual. Some bathers apply a thin layer of fine powder or chalk to their skin after pumice scrubbing, believed to soothe irritation and improve appearance. It's like an ancient after-sun lotion, except more likely to be made from crushed minerals than fancy cosmetics. You try a little on your own forearm and wince as it dries fast and chalky. Walking toward the pools, your skin tingles, feeling raw but strangely fresh. The roughness of the pumice has exfoliated you, and while some parts are tender, the overall sensation is one of renewal. You realize that despite all the chaos, the grime, and the awkward communal moments, this painful scrubbing is a small victory proof of your endurance and participation in a long tradition. You catch sight of a large basin filled with fresh water, and you step in to rinse off, letting the cool liquid wash away the last traces of powder and grit. Around you, the bathhouse continues its symphony: laughter, splashes, arguments, and whispered secrets. You think about how something as simple as a pumice stone could be so deeply woven into Roman life, a tool of both hygiene and identity. It's a reminder that cleanliness in ancient Rome wasn't just practical, it was cultural, social, and sometimes painful. As you dry your skin with your damp towel, you can't help but smile at the thought of centuries of bathers before you, scrubbing and scraping and laughing through the discomfort. The pumice stone may have been rough, but it polished not just their bodies, but the rituals that defined a civilization. And as you step out of the bathhouse into the fading daylight, your skin raw but shining, you carry with you a newfound respect for this odd, abrasive piece of Roman hygiene history. You exit the bustling main halls of the bathhouse and find yourself drawn toward a quieter, more shadowed corner chamber reserved for oiling and perfume application. Here, the air is thick with a heady mix of scents, and the flickering light from oil lamps casts dancing shadows across walls painted in deep reds and golds. The atmosphere feels intimate, almost sacred, a sharp contrast to the lively chaos just steps away. You settle onto a low marble bench, and a bath attendant approaches carrying a tray laden with small amphorae filled with various oils: olive, almond, myrtle, and exotic blends scented with rose, cinnamon, or even frankincense. Each vial glimmers under the soft light, promising transformation. You realize that oiling wasn't just about skin care, it was an art form, a ritual loaded with social meaning. The attendant picks up a small, elegantly carved bottle and pours a few drops of golden oil into his palm. As he rubs it between his fingers, the rich aroma fills the space, and you close your eyes, breathing it in deeply. Olive oil, they say, was the base of Roman grooming, nourishing and moisturizing skin, while the added perfumes were the final flourish, a signature scent to announce your status and sophistication. Applying oil in the baths was an involved process. First, you'd massage the oil deeply into your skin, allowing it to soak in. Then came the scraping, your strigil dragging across the oiled flesh, pulling away the dirt and dead skin along with the excess oil. The combination left your body smooth, fragrant, and gleaming. You watch the attendant expertly apply oil to a woman nearby. Her skin gleams under the light, and she seems to glow not just from the oil, but from the confidence of being cared for in this ritualized way. The scent clings to her, a subtle whisper of roses and honey. Historians still debate how widespread the use of perfumed oils was among ordinary Romans. Some sources suggest only the wealthy could afford the finest blends, while others argue that cheaper, locally made oils made fragrance accessible to many. The sheer variety of oils discovered in archaeological sites hints at a culture obsessed with scent and appearance, regardless of social rank. Nearby, a group of bathers discusses the latest trends in perfumery. One boasts about importing rare frankincense from Arabia, claiming it softens the hardest skin and wins the coldest hearts. Another argues that simpler, herb-infused oils are better for the complexion and wallet. You realize that, even in the baths, status was often measured in scent. You decide to try a bit of myrtle oil. It's sweet, slightly minty fragrance, surprising and refreshing against the heavy warmth of the bathhouse. As you massage it into your arms and neck, you feel a calming effect wash over you, both physical and psychological. This is more than grooming. It's a moment of self-care, a brief escape from the overwhelming world around you. The attendant offers you a small, intricately carved comb, made from bone or ivory, used to smooth hair and remove stray oils or sweat. You run it through your damp locks, the fine teeth gliding through tangles and leaving your hair glossy and well kept. In Rome, hair care was as important as skin, and combs were treasured possessions, sometimes even status symbols. You notice that some bathers wear their hair in elaborate styles, with braids, curls, and jeweled pins, another layer of their public identity. Perfume and oil weren't just for the body. They permeated hair, clothing, even pets, turning scent into a social language. Nearby, an elderly man applies a thick layer of scented ointment to his beard. Stroking it thoughtfully, he murmurs something about the virtues of lavender and how it keeps the mind sharp and the tongue sweet. You wonder if he means that literally or metaphorically. As you sit wrapped in your scented glow, you observe the rhythms of the bathhouse, how oiling and perfuming punctuate the bathing experience, marking transitions between rooms and states of being. It's a cyclical dance of cleansing, scenting, scraping, and refreshing, repeated again and again. You think about how Romans viewed the body as a temple, a vessel not just for function, but for display and ritual. Oils and perfumes were part of that reverence, ways to honor oneself and signal belonging in the complex social fabric, yet the process was not without its contradictions. Oils could attract insects or clog pores, especially in the humid bath environment. Some warned against overuse, claiming excessive fragrance was a sign of vanity or moral weakness. Others embraced it wholeheartedly, turning their scent into a weapon of seduction or power. You realize that oiling in the Roman baths was both practical and symbolica, messy, fragrant, sometimes uncomfortable act that bound people together in ritual and culture. It's another layer of the bathhouse experience, not just cleaning away dirt, but actively constructing identity as the oil settles on your skin, mingling with the lingering perfumes in the air. You feel a deep sense of connection to centuries of bathers before you men and women who scrubbed, scraped, scented, and socialized in these same stone halls. You stand slowly, feeling the slick sheen of oil and fragrance on your skin, and step toward the next chamber. The baths continue to unfold around you, a labyrinth of steam, water, and human stories that blend together like the scents clinging to your fingertips. You take a deep breath and prepare for whatever comes next, knowing that every drop of oil is part of the grand ritualon ancient dance of cleanliness, power, and identity that's still echoing through time. You step into the Palestroth sprawling exercise yard, where Romans came to train their bodies before indulging in the baths themselves. The open-air space is a stark contrast to the steamy interiors you've wandered through so far. Bright sunlight poured down, casting long shadows from towering columns and fluted statues that line the courtyard like silent sentinels. The air smells faintly of dust, sweat, and the sharp tang of freshly oiled leather from the training equipment scattered about. Around you, athletes stretch, wrestle, and spar with a focused intensity that's both inspiring and exhausting to watch. The sounds of grunts, the slap of skin on skin, and the shuffle of sandals on stone create a rhythmic soundtrack to this arena of physical exertion. Some men are practicing with wooden swords and shields, while others lift heavy stones or sprint along the marked tracks. Every movement is a display of discipline, strength, and the Roman ideal of virtus virtue expressed through courage and excellence. You move cautiously through the crowd, too aware of the heat radiating from the sun-baked stones beneath your feet. You try to imagine stepping into the shoes of these athletes, coated with oil and dust, muscles taut with effort. How many had been soldiers, gladiators, or labourers? Their daily lives a constant test of endurance? The palestra was more than just a gym. It was a training ground for survival and status. Historians still debate how open these spaces were to the general public. Some argue the palestra was a democratic place, where all citizens could train and socialize, while others suggest it was a preserve of the wealthy and elite. The evidence is mixed, but it's clear that physical fitness was highly valued across social strata in Roman culture. You pause to watch a wrestling match unfolding nearby. Two young men grapple fiercely, their limbs entwined in a brutal but skillful dance. Sweat glistens on their bodies as they struggle for dominance. Each maneuver met with cheers and shouts from the surrounding crowd. The winner pins his opponent, and the crowd erupts in applause, a mix of admiration and relief. Nearby, an older man coaches a group of boys, demonstrating proper technique and urging them to push harder. His voice is firm but encouraging, a reminder that training was both a physical and moral exercise in Rome. Discipline, respect, and resilience were as important as strength. You wander toward a long row of benches, where bathers rest between bouts of exercise. Some sip from leather water skins, while others massage sore muscles with their hands or with small oil flasks. The atmosphere is charged but convivial, a community united by sweat and shared effort. Amidst the activity, you notice something curious: small tablets set into the walls, inscribed with gym rules and guidelines for behavior. They admonish bathers to respect one another, avoid excessive noise, and maintain cleanliness. These inscriptions offer a glimpse into how the Romans managed order in a space that could easily descend into chaos. You try your hand at some of the equipment: a wooden discus, a leather ball stuffed with sand, and a set of weights shaped like spheres with handles. The effort is humbling. Your muscles protest at the unfamiliar strain, but there's also a strange satisfaction in the challenge. You understand why the Romans valued physical training so highly. It was a testament to one's character and a preparation for life's battles. Nearby, a group of older men recline on benches, engaged in heated debate. Their voices rise and fall with passion as they discuss politics, philosophy, and the latest scandals. The palestra was not just a place for the body, but also the mind, a space where ideas and alliances were forged alongside muscles. You spot a young woman weaving through the crowd, balancing a tray of figs and water. Her presence is a reminder that while the palestra was male-dominated, women played a role in the baths as attendants, entertainers, and sometimes as participants in designated hours or sections. The sun climbs higher, and the heat intensifies. Sweat drips down your back as you take a slow breath, absorbing the vibrant energy of the palestra. It's a world apart from the steamy baths, yet intrinsically linked, a vital part of the Roman bathing ritual that combined exertion with cleansing. You pause before a small fountain. It's cool water, a welcome respite. Dipping your fingers in, you splash your face and neck, the shock of cold water refreshing your overheated skin. Around you, laughter and conversation rise, a testament to the social vitality of these ancient spaces. As you prepare to leave the palestra and return to the baths, you reflect on the profound role these places played in Roman life. They were arenas of competition and camaraderie, spaces where body and mind were honed together. The baths were more than hygiene; they were a cultural crucible, shaping identities and communities in equal measure. You feel a renewed appreciation for the layered rituals of the baths, the sweat and steam, the scrubbing and oiling, the cold plunges and heated debates. In this moment, amid the clang of training and the chatter of the crowd, you understand that to bathe in ancient Rome was to live fully embracing all the discomfort, connection, and glory it entailed. You step cautiously through a narrow arched doorway and into the sudatorium, the Roman sweat room, where the air hits you like a hot, wet wave. The steam is thick enough to blur your vision, clinging to your skin and curling in soft tendrils around your shoulders and face. The chamber is an intense sanctuary of heat and moisture, designed to coax every last drop of sweat from your body, forcing you into a state of physical and mental surrender. Marble benches line the damp walls, glistening with condensation, inviting you to sit and become part of the living. Breathing humidity, you lower yourself carefully onto the cool stone, which is paradoxically both refreshing and slippery, and close your eyes. The warm mist wraps around you like a heavy cloak, muffling sound and softening edges until the outside world feels distant and unimportant. You start to notice the rhythm of your breathing, the shallow inhales followed by slow exhalations. Your lungs adjust to the dense, hot air. The sensation is almost dreamlike, hypnotic. Sweat beads instantly across your forehead and trails down your neck, mingling with the faint scent of olive oil, still clinging to your skin from earlier scrubbing. The mixture of steam and fragrance forms a dense cloud that feels as ancient as Rome itself. The sudatorium was more than just a place to sweat, it was a crucible of purification. The Romans believed that sweating intensely helped balance the four humors: blood, flame, yellow bile, and black bile, the vital fluids that determined health and temperament. By forcing the body to sweat, the sudatorium was thought to purge toxins, illnesses, and negative spirits, leaving the bather renewed and protected. Historians still debate the exact design and function of the sudatorium. Some argue it was a dry steam room, heated by hot air from the hypocaust beneath the floors, while others suggest it was a humid sauna, using boiling water poured onto heated stones to create clouds of vapor. Archaeological evidence from the baths of Caracalla and Diocletian points to sophisticated heating systems, but the sensory experience remains elusive, something only those who lived it could truly understand. As you sit, the heat begins to seep into your muscles, loosening tension and dissolving fatigue. Your skin flushes a deep rosy hue, warmth radiating from your core. The air is so thick with moisture that every breath feels like inhaling soft mist. Your clothes and hair are soaked, the fabric clinging to your skin like a second layer. Around you, the chamber hums quietly with the presence of others. Some sit silently, eyes closed, surrendering to the heat and their own thoughts. Others whisper conversations, political rumors, poetic verses, scandalous gossipex changed in low tones. Almost reverently, you catch fragments: a senator's betrayal, the latest gladiator's feat, a philosopher's latest theory on fate. The social atmosphere in the sudatorium is intimate and complex. Despite the oppressive heat, people come together here, bound by the shared ordeal. The intense environment dissolves superficial barriers. Status fades beneath the mist, leaving raw humanity. You sense that in this haze, bonds were forged and broken, secrets whispered, and rivalries cooled or ignited. You hear a kuva sharp, hacking sound that echoes in the thick air. Someone nearby is clearly struggling with the humidity. The heat can be cruel, especially to the elderly or infirm. You wonder how many bathers suffered fainting spells or worse in this room. Ancient medical texts warn of the dangers of sudden exposure to heat, especially without proper moderation. Still, for many, the sudatorium was a place of rejuvenation. The process of sweating was ritualized. Bathhouse attendants would guide patrons through a sequence of rooms, each hotter and more intense, culminating here in the thickest, most enveloping steam. This was the apex of the cleansing experience, where body and mind were stripped bare. The sounds around you shift subtly as the light filtering through small barred windows plays across damp stone. The occasional drip of water echoes softly, mixing with muffled voices and the gentle scrape of sandals on marble. You imagine the countless generations who sat here before you, enduring the heat, sharing the silence, connecting through a timeless ritual. Your skin prickles as sweat beads cascade down your back, neck, and arms. The wetness feels endless. A physical baptism. The heat presses on your temples. Your heartbeat slows and steadies, and a peculiar calm begins to settle. It's a paradoxical peace born of discomfort and acceptance of vulnerability and transformation. You notice a faint scent of burning incense lingering in the air, mingling with the olive oil and the earthiness of heated stone. Some bathhouses burned herbs like rosemary or frankincense in the sudatorium, believed to purify not just the body, but also the spirit. The smell is subtle but grounding, a sensory thread weaving through the mist. Around you, the bathers begin to shift, rising slowly from benches or exchanging tired smiles. The ritual is nearing its end for many. You stand, muscles loose, but knees trembling slightly, and step toward the exit. The cool air of the adjacent chamber feels like a balm. You inhale deeply, feeling the contrast sting pleasantly. Your body is slick with sweat and oil, your skin flushed and glowing. The experience has been intense and early overwhelming, but you are changed. As you towel off, do you reflect on the sudatorium's place within the larger context of Roman bathing culture? It was a place of purification, yes, but also of social connection and personal transformation. The sweat that poured from the body was not just a physical release, but a metaphorical shedding of the day's burdens and impurities. You think about the bath's contradictory nature, places of luxury and grime, discipline and indulgence, cleansing and contamination. The sudatorium encapsulates this perfectly, a furnace of discomfort that promised renewal. Stepping out into the hallways of the bathhouse, the thick steam fades, replaced by cooler, driller air. The voices and laughter resume their cadence, and the ritual continues with scrubbing, oiling, and soaking. You carry with you the memory of the heat's embrace, the sweat's release, and the quiet transformation that only a Roman sweat room could offer. The baths have been a journey through extremes of temperature, sensation, and social experience. And though you are coated with oil and dust, flushed from the heat and chilled from the plunge pools, you feel a deep, ancient connection to the countless souls who have walked these halls before you. The Roman bathhouse is a paradox, a marvel, and a nightmare all at once. But above all, it is a place of humanity, messy, noisy, fragrant, and utterly unforgettable. You find yourself moving deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of the bath complex, drawn toward a quieter, almost secretive chamber known as the Natashiatha, open-air swimming pool. Unlike the enclosed, steamy rooms you've already experienced, this pool stretches wide beneath the open sky. Its cool, shimmering waters sparkling under the sun's direct gaze. The air here is fresh and crisp, a clean contrast to the heavy, humid atmosphere inside the bathhouse walls. The Natatio was the jewel in the crown of many Roman baths, a place where patrons could swim, cool off, and socialize amid the grandeur of sprawling colonnades and ornate fountains. The pool is vast, more a small lake than a mere pool, with steps leading gently into its clear depths. The mosaic floors shimmer below the surface, depicting aquatic life and mythological scenes of Neptune's reign. You slip slowly into the water, the initial chill biting pleasantly against your skin. It's an invigorating shock after the heat and steam of the inner chambers. The water's cool embrace wakes your senses, flushing away the lingering oil and sweat from earlier rituals. You begin to swim, the water supporting your body as your limbs move rhythmically in time with your breath. Around you, bathers glide gracefully or splash playfully, laughter echoing off the marble and stone. Children dart through the shallows, their delighted squeals mingling with the deeper conversations of adults lounging poolside. Some men engage in athletic contests, racing or diving from low platforms. Others recline at the edges, their bodies glistening and relaxed, basking in the sun. The Natatio was more than a recreational space. It was an essential part of Roman bathing culture, embodying ideals of health, leisure, and social hierarchy. The cool water not only refreshed but symbolized renewal and purification, a final cleansing after the intense heat of the steam rooms and the plunge pools. Historians still debate whether the Natatio was accessible to all bathers or reserved for the elite. Some argue that in grand complexes like the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian, it was open to everyone, while others suggest certain sections or times were exclusive. Regardless, it was a coveted spot, a place to see and be seen. As you swim, you notice the intricate waterworks that feed the pool, channels and fountains constantly circulating fresh water, maintaining a gentle current and preventing stagnation. The engineering marvel behind these baths is evident everywhere, from aqueducts supplying water to hypocausts, heating rooms. It's a testament to Roman innovation and obsession with water management. You pause to catch your breath and float on your back, gazing up at the open sky, framed by columns and statues. The sun warms your face as a gentle breeze ripples the surface of the water, carrying the mixed scents of wet stone, blooming flowers from nearby gardens, and faint traces of oils from other bathers. Near the pool's edge, musicians play lyres and flutes, their melodies soft and enchanting. The music blends with the sounds of splashing, conversation, and bird song, creating a serene yet vibrant atmosphere. It feels like stepping into a living mosaic of Roman life where art, nature, and humanity intertwine. You observe a group of elderly men in conversation, their faces etched with years of experience. They speak of politics, recent games at the Colosseum, and the latest intrigues in the Senate. Their voices carry a mix of nostalgia and sharp wit, a reminder that even here, leisure was entwined with the pulse of power. A young woman glides past on a small raft, her laughter bright and unrestrained. She wears a simple tunic, her hair braided with ribbons that trail behind her like streamers. She tosses a handful of fragrant herbs into the water, sending ripples that shimmer like liquid jewels. The ritual is Charminga personal offering, a gesture of beauty amid routine bathing. You swim toward a fountain shaped like a sea monster, water spouting gently from its open jaws. It's both whimsical and imposing, a reminder of Rome's fascination with myth and the sea. You dip your hands into the cool spray, splashing your face and shoulders, feeling renewed. The Natatio was also a social arena place for flirtation, deals, and gossip. You catch snippets of conversation, whispered promises, sharp barbs, and laughter that sparkles as brightly as the water. The pool's openness encourages both intimacy and display, a delicate balance of privacy and exposure. You consider the contrast between this open-air sanctuary and the dark, steamy rooms inside. Here, beneath the sun and sky, if you feel freer, more connected to the natural world and to those around you, the water cleanses not only your body, but your mind, washing away the fatigue and grime of the day. After a leisurely swim, you climb out and wrap yourself in your towel. Your skin glows with freshness, the cool water having softened and soothed the layers of oil and dirt. You watch other bathers preparing to leave or move on to other rooms, the cycle of bathing and socializing ongoing. You pause near the pool's edge to take in the view once more. The sun is beginning to dip, casting golden light that dances across the water's surface. The bathhouse feels a living ancient heartbeat of stone, water, and people. You realize that the Natatio embodies much of what the Roman baths were about, a blend of utility and beauty, labor and leisure, the communal and the personal. It's a place where the elements converge to create a moment of harmony amid the bustling life of the city. As you towel off and prepare to leave the Natatio, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for having witnessed this timeless ritual dance of water and light, heat and coolness, solitude and companionship. The Roman bathhouse, with all its complexities and contradictions, has revealed itself as a world where humanity's need for cleansing, connection, and celebration played out in every splash and sigh. You step back into the corridors, ready to continue your journey, forever changed by the ancient waters and the stories they hold. You find yourself drifting toward the lesser-known spaces of the bathhouses mall, shadowed rooms where patrons could escape the constant bustle and indulge in quiet contemplation or intimate conversation. This is the Bibliotheca, the bathhouse library, an unexpected sanctuary of learning and reflection amid the steam, sweat, and splashes. The air here is cooler, tinged with the faint scent of old parchment and beeswax candles flickering in wall sconces. Rows of wooden shelves, darkened with age, hold scrolls and codices, works of philosophy, poetry, history, and science. The sheer presence of books in such a public, lively space reveals the Romans' commitment to the mind as well as the body. You run your fingers along the spines of leather-bound scroll cases, feeling the texture of vellum and papyrus beneath your fingertips. The Romans believed that bathing wasn't just about cleansing the flesh, but also the mind. Intellectual pursuits were woven seamlessly into the rituals of daily life. And many bathhouses boasted reading rooms, lecture halls, and even performance spaces. Historians still debate how often bathers actually used the libraries. Some argue they were little more than decoration, prestige markers designed to elevate the bath's status. Others suggest that philosophers, students, and politicians genuinely congregated here, engaging in spirited debates and literary discussions. You settle into a quiet alcove with a scroll in hand, the faded ink tracing the lines of a Cicero speech. Around you, others read silently or whisper about the latest philosophical trends. A teacher leads a small group in reciting verses from Virgil, their voices a gentle murmur, blending with the occasional crackle of burning oil lamps. The presence of such a space within the baths challenges modern assumptions about ancient leisure. The baths were not just about cleanliness and socializing, but also about cultivating virtue and wisdom. In this sense, the bibliotheca is as essential as the pools and steam rooms. You overhear a conversation about Stoicism, a philosophy prized by many Roman elites. The speakers discuss how controlling desires and emotions leads to tranquility, something they seek not only in their minds, but also in the ritual of bathing. The connection between physical and mental discipline is palpable. A young woman nearby pores over a medical treatise, her brow furrowed in concentration. She flips through pages describing herbal remedies and hygiene practices. You recall how Roman medicine often intertwined with bathing, with baths serving as therapeutic centers where ailments were soothed by heat, water, and massage. The bibliotheca also housed legal texts and official decrees. The baths functioned as public spaces where news was exchanged, laws discussed, and decisions influenced. It's easy to imagine senators stopping by between sessions, reading the latest proclamations or drafting speeches in the quiet corners. You marvel at the blend of leisure and learning, relaxation and rigor. The bathhouse, with all its sensory overload, offers moments of calm and clarity, spaces where the mind can wander and engage with ideas as profoundly as the body engages with steam and water. You carefully roll up your scroll and stand, stretching your limbs after the long reading session. Outside, the distant sounds of the palestra reach your ears, the slap of sandals, the grunts of exertion, the splash of water. Life continues, unabated. Before you leave, you pause by a fresco depicting Athena, goddess of wisdom, holding a scroll and a spear. The image is fitting. This space is a temple of both body and mind. You step back into the bustling halls, carrying with you the echoes of ancient knowledge and the timeless quest for balance between cleansing and contemplation, action and reflection. The Roman baths, with all their contradictions and complexity, remain a testament to a civilization that valued the whole person, body, mind, and spirit intertwined beneath the arches of marble and the whispers of history. You step carefully into the dimly lit chamber known as the Laconicum, the dry, sweating room of the Roman bathhouse. The air here is unlike the dense, moist steam of the sudatorium. Instead, it is heavy, dry, and intensely hot, like stepping into a furnace. Your skin immediately reacts, beads of sweat popping up across your forehead and trailing down your neck. The dry heat presses on you, drawing moisture from every pore. The Laconicum was designed to induce profuse sweating without the dampness of a steam room. It was a place where bathers would go to cleanse themselves deeply, to shed not only physical grime, but also mental burdens. The heat is stifling and relentless, but with every passing moment, your body begins to adapt, entering a strange rhythm of discomfort and release. You settle onto a marble bench carved to fit the contours of a reclining body. The coolness of the stone against your flushed skin is a fleeting relief before the heat creeps back in. The chamber's walls are smooth, painted with faded red and gold hues that glimmer faintly under the glow of wall sconces. The design is minimalist, focused on function rather than decoration, a place for pure, focused sweating. The Roman bathhouse was a carefully choreographed sequence, and the laconicum served as a crucial phase after the hot rooms. But before the cold plunge, you imagine the ritualistic flow entering the laconicum, allowing your body to sweat away impurities, then moving through the baths to cool and refresh. Historians still debate the precise heating mechanism of the laconicum. Some sources suggest it was heated by hot air circulated from the hypocaust system beneath the floors, while others believe it relied on fires burning in adjacent chambers to pump dry heat into the room. Regardless, the effect was undeniable, a dry oven that baked away sweat and stiffness. You breathe slowly, trying to find calm amid the oppressive warmth. The sweat streams freely now, your clothes clinging uncomfortably to your skin. You close your eyes and focus on the sensations, the tightness in your chest, the prickling heat on your scalp, the warmth pooling in your muscles. It's exhausting but oddly hypnotic. Around you, others sit or recline silently, faces flushed, eyes half closed in quiet meditation or exhaustion. Occasionally, soft whispers ripple through the room plans for later baths, critiques of the day's politics, or whispered jokes about the antics of gladiators. You overhear a conversation about the therapeutic value of the laconicum. Some bathers swear it helped with ailments ranging from arthritis to skin conditions. Others claim it strengthened the spirit, preparing them for the challenges of life outside the bathhouse walls. A young man shifts uneasily nearby, wiping sweat from his brow. He murmurs about the dangers of overheating, warning a companion to leave before the heat becomes too much. The fragility of the human body is starkly apparent in such extremes. You think about the paradox of Roman bathing ritual show. They embraced discomfort and vulnerability as a path to renewal and strength. The laconicum embodies this perfectly, a chamber of relentless heat that demands patience and resilience. The door creaks open, and a bath attendant enters with a basin of cool water. He splashes some over a bather's feet, offering momentary relief. The contrast between the dry heat and the cool water is a sensory shock that revives the weary doosan. You feel yourself nearing the limit of endurance, muscles trembling slightly. Slowly, deliberately, you rise and make your way toward the exit. The air outside suddenly fresh and sweet after the laconicum's furnace. As you step back into the softer warmth of the tepidarium, you reflect on the ancient art of heat therapy. The Romans harnessed fire and stone not only to cleanse but to challenge, to test the body's limits and encourage transformation. You realize that the laconicum, with its dry, punishing heat, was as much about mental fortitude as physical cleanliness. It demanded surrender and control in equal measure. You wrap your towel tightly around yourself, muscles relaxed, but your spirit invigorated. The bathhouse has revealed its many faces, from icy plunges to burning rooms, from crowded pools to silent libraries. Each space tells a story of a civilization obsessed with balance, ritual, and the pursuit of perfection. As you continue your journey through the bath complex, if you carry with you the memory of the laconicum's dry fiera, reminder that sometimes renewal comes not from comfort, but from facing the heat head-on. You emerge from the intensity of the laconicum into the gentle embrace of the tepidarium, the warm room that feels like a soothing lull after the dry furnace you just endured. The air here is thick with soft steam and the subtle aroma of herb mint, rosemary, and a hint of lavender wafting from oil burners nestled in the corners. It's a world apart from the oppressive heat and heavy mist of the previous chamber, yet equally vital in the sequence of Roman bathing. The tepidarium was designed to ease bathers between extremes of temperature. Here, the heat is moderate, warm enough to relax your muscles and keep your pores open, but mild enough to let your mind settle and your body recover. Marble benches line the walls, polished smooth and just warm to the touch. You find a spot near a softly trickling fountain. The sound of water, mixing with faint murmurs and laughter, creating a tranquil symphony. You sit down and exhale slowly, feeling the warmth seep into your chilled limbs and fatigued muscles. The room's light is diffuse, filtered through small windows and flickering oil lamps, casting dancing shadows on the mosaic floors that depict scenes of pastoral tranquility nymphs beside streams, birds alighting on leafy branches, delicate flowers unfolding in eternal spring. Around you, bathers recline, some engaged in quiet conversation, others lost in thought. You overhear discussions ranging from philosophical musings to the latest gladiatorial contests, political scandals, and poetic recitations. The baths were a crossroads of social life, a place where the body and mind intertwined in shared rituals and communal stories. Historians still debate the tepidarium's precise role. Some suggest it was primarily functional, a transitional space to acclimate the body before moving to hotter or colder rooms. Others propose it had psychological importance, a place to relax and socialize without the extremes that tax the body. Either way, its design reflects the Romans' nuanced understanding of physical and mental wellness. You notice the intricate heating system beneath the floor, the hypocaust that sends gentle warmth up through the tiles. The engineering is subtle but effective, creating a comforting environment that balances the lingering moisture and warmth. The heat isn't overpowering. It's the kind of gentle embrace that encourages languor and reflection. A group of women nearby are sharing scented oils and powders, delicately applying them to one another's arms and necks. Their laughter bubbles like a spring as they exchange beauty tips and stories. You watch, fascinated by the intimate camaraderie that unfolds amidst the steam and marble. You decide to join in, accepting a dab of rose-scented oil from a slender hand. The fragrance is soft, floral, and a little intoxicating. As you rub the oil into your skin, you feel a comforting warmth that lingers, mingling with the natural heat of the room. Nearby, a young man recounts a tale from a recent voyage, describing exotic spices and strange rituals from distant provinces of the empire. His audience listens raptly, eyes shining with curiosity. The baths were not just local hubs, but melting pots of culture, where news and ideas traveled faster than the empire's roads. You take a slow sip from a goblet of honeyed wine offered by a passing attendant. The sweetness, a perfect complement to the room's calm. The contrast with the dry heat of the laconicum and the icy plunge of the frigidarium makes the tepidarium feel like a gentle oasis, a place of respite. The bathhouse continues its rhythm around you, the clinking of glass, the rustle of linen, the soft murmurs of changing conversations. Every sense is engaged. The warmth of the marble, the scent of oil and herbs, the taste of sweet wine, the sight of shimmering mosaics, the sound of water and voices blending in harmony. You reflect on how the tepidarium embodies the Roman philosophy of balance, the golden mean between excess and deficiency. Heat, and cold, action and rest. The baths were more than cleansing rituals. They were lessons in moderation and mindfulness, enacted daily in stone and steam. As you recline further, the tension in your shoulders begins to ease. Your breathing slows. Your heartbeat steadies. You feel connected to the generations who came before, who sought peace and pleasure in these very stones. The tepidarium is a chamber of quiet transformation, where the body cools gently, the mind softens, and the soul prepares to rejoin the world. It's a liminal space, bridging extremes and reminding you that renewal is often found in balance. You close your eyes, letting the warmth cradle you like a lullaby, savoring the simple perfection of the moment. The baths are not just about survival or hygiene, they are about embracing the full spectrum of human experience, from discomfort to delight, from solitude to community. As you rise and prepare to move on, you carry with you the calm grace of the tepidarium, a quiet reminder that even amid chaos, there are places of peace. You stand on the cool marble steps leading into the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, its waters shimmering like a vast, glistening mirror beneath the high vaulted ceiling. The sudden chill of the water hits you with an electrifying shock, your breath catching as goosebumps rise along your arms. The air here is crisp and invigorating, a stark contrast to the dense warmth and steam you've just left behind in the tepidarium and laconicum. The coolness surrounds you like a sharp gust, waking every sense and igniting your blood. As you slowly lower yourself into the icy embrace of the pool, the cold seeps deep into your muscles and bones, tightening your skin and sending a ripple of tingling energy through your body. The mosaic floor beneath you, adorned with vivid depictions of dolphins and sea nymphs, seems to dance beneath the ripples you create. You take a deep breath, holding it briefly as you fully immerse yourself, feeling the rush of water envelop you in a refreshing but bracing embrace. The frigidarium was the final purification ritual in the Roman bathing sequence, designed to close the pores opened by the earlier heat treatments and steam rooms. This sudden temperature shift was not only cleansing, but also symbolic a baptism of cold that renewed both body and spirit. It was a moment of renewal, a baptism into the community of bathers who shared this ancient invigorating experience. Around you, the pool is alive with activity. Groups of bathers splash playfully, their laughter echoing softly against the marble walls. Children dart in and out of the water, their joyous cries mingling with the low murmur of conversation among the more composed adults seated poolside. Some bathers test their endurance by submerging fully, holding their breath as long as possible before surfacing with triumphant smiles and gasps of cold air. You join a friendly competition of breath holding, the simple challenge, bringing a moment of shared camaraderie and youthful energy. The frigidarium also served as a social arena. Many patrons used this communal space to forge relationships, exchange gossip, or negotiate deals, their voices mingling with the gentle lapping of water. You overhear a heated discussion about a recent gladiatorial match, political rumors swirling alongside plans for upcoming festivities. The bathhouse was as much a public square as a place of cleansing. Historians still debate the health implications of the cold plunge. Some ancient medical texts praise the invigorating effects on circulation and the immune system, while others caution about the risks of sudden temperature changes causing dizziness or shock. Despite the risks, the ritual persisted as an essential aspect of Roman bathing culture, a testament to the enduring human desire for renewal through trial. You pause near a small altar dedicated to Neptune, the god of the sea, water flowing gently from its ornate spouts. Offerings of coins and small carved figurines lie scattered at its base. Evidence of devotion and superstition intertwined with everyday ritual. The presence of the divine here reminds you that bathing was as much a spiritual practice as a physical one. Climbing out of the pool, you feel the chill lingering on your skin, your muscles tightening in response. Wrapping yourself in a thick woolen cloak, you settle onto a bench, letting the cold slowly ebb as warmth from the surrounding rooms seeps back into your body. The contrast between hot and cold, discomfort and relief, exhaustion and exhilaration is the essence of the Roman bathing experience. You watch others completing their baths, their faces flushed with vitality or flushed from exertion. Some preparing to move on to massage or oiling rooms, others ready to leave the complex. The bathhouse pulses with life, a microcosm of Roman society, rich with ritual, pleasure, and complexity. Reflecting on the frigidarium, you realize it encapsulates the paradox of Roman bathing, a blend of sensory extremes designed not only to cleanse, but to renew and connect. The cold plunge was both an ending and a beginning, a final purification and a fresh start. Rising from your bench, you carry with you the invigorating spirit of the frigidarium, the sharp kiss of cold water, and the shared experience of countless souls who found solace, challenge, and community beneath the marble arches. As you prepare to leave, the bathhouse's timeless hum surrounds you, the splash of water, the murmur of voices, the echo of footsteps on stone, a symphony that has played for millennia. You step out into the world, cleansed, renewed, and forever touched by the enduring ritual of Roman bathing. You move from the cool freshness of the frigidarium into the quieter, more contemplative spaces of the bath complex, specifically the apoditerium, to the changing room where bathers began and ended their journey. This is the transitional space, a kind of gateway between the outside world and the steam-filled sanctuaries inside. The apoditerium is a large, vaulted chamber lined with niches and cubbies carved into the walls, each holding garments, sandals, and personal items of the bathers who came before you. The stone is worn smooth from centuries of hands reaching in and out, retrieving their belongings, and settling into the rhythm of bathing life. You notice graffiti etched into the walls, names, poems, crude jokes, and curses, offering a glimpse into the everyday lives and humor of those long gone. Here, you take off your damp tunic and sandals, folding them carefully and tucking them into your assigned cubby. The act is a quiet ritual of shedding, a physical symbol of leaving behind the dirt, worries of daily life. You pause for a moment to run your hands over the cool marble, feeling the smoothness and history beneath your fingertips. Around you, bathers move in and out, some wrapping themselves in fresh towels or cloaks, others preparing to enter the baths. The atmosphere is a mix of anticipation and relaxation, a space of beginnings and endings. The conversations here are softer, more private, as people transition between the public spectacle of the pools and the personal intimacy of their routines. Historians argue about the social dynamics of the apoditirium. While it was a public space, it also offered moments of privacy in an otherwise communal experience. You imagine whispered conversations, furtive glances, and secret exchanges taking place amid the bustle. You overhear a heated discussion about the latest political intrigue in Rome. A group of men debate loudly about recent senatorial decrees, their voices rising and falling like waves. Nearby, a woman offers advice to a younger companion about grooming and perfume, the strands of their dialogue weaving through the space like invisible threads. The apoditirium was more than a place to change. It was a social hub where alliances were formed, news was exchanged, and identities were constructed. You feel the weight of centuries of human stories settling around you, the echoes of laughter, argument, and companionship lingering like a faint perfume. As you slip into a fresh tunic, you notice the folded piece of parchment tucked into one of the cubbies. Curious, you unfold it and find a crudely drawn map of the bathhouse, marking secret passages and lesser-known chambers, possibly a prank, or a guide left by a seasoned bather. The map hints at the labyrinthine nature of the complex, a sprawling palace of water, stone, and steam. You tuck the parchment into your belt, amused by the mystery it adds to your experience. The baths were not only places of cleansing, but also of adventure, each corner holding potential for discovery and surprise. Preparing to leave, you take a final look around the apoditirium, appreciating its role as a quiet witness to the grand spectacle of the baths. It is the place where transformation begins and ends, a chamber of both vulnerability and strength. As you step out into the streets of Rome, the noise and chaos of the city rush back in the clatter of carts, the chatter of vendors, the distant calls of street performers. Yet, beneath the din, you carry the calm and clarity born in the baths, a secret strength forged in steam and stone. The apoditirium reminds you that even in the most public spaces, moments of private reflection endure. It is the threshold between worlds, between the ancient and the modern, the physical and the spiritual. And as you walk away, you know that the ritual of bathing, with all its contradictions and complexities, has left an indelible mark on your body and soul. You step into the bustling courtyard outside the bathhouse, where the echoes of the marble halls fade into the lively rhythms of the city. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the cobblestones and igniting the sky with hues of amber and rose. The scent of roasting meat drifts from nearby stalls, mingling with the faint perfume still clinging to your skin. Before you lies a market square, alive, with vendors shouting their wares: fresh fish, ripe figs, fragrant spices, children weaving through the crowd like flashes of movement. The air is thick with the sounds of bargaining, laughter, and the occasional braying of donkeys. The city pulses around you, a living organism of stone, sweat, and human ambition. You pose, feeling the cool evening breeze brush against your damp skin. The contrast, sharp after hours spent submerged in heat and water, it's a moment of transition between the sanctuary of the baths and the wild unpredictability of Rome's streets. You notice a group of street performers gathering near a fountain, jugglers tossing flaming torches, acrobats twisting through the air, and a lone musician strumming a lyre with delicate fingers. Their talents draw a small crowd, faces lit with wonder and delight. The ancient baths may have been temples of order and ritual, but the city beyond is a theater of chaos and spectacle. You wander toward a nearby tavern, the wooden sign creaking in the wind, its painted image of a frothy cup inviting you inside. The smell of spiced wine and roasting meats grows stronger as you approach. Inside, patrons jostle for space, voices rising in song and argument. The tavern is a microcosm of Roman life, boisterous, messy, and endlessly human. You find a seat at the bar and order a cup of mulled wine. The warmth spreads through your chest, a perfect complement to the cooling evening. Around you, conversations swirl, soldiers recounting campaigns, merchants boasting of exotic goods, poets declaiming verses to anyone who will listen. The tavern feels like an extension of the bathsa place, where stories begun in steam and water continue over food and drink. You catch snippets of tales about lovers met in the frigidarium, rivalries settled in the palaestra, and deals brokered in the oiling rooms. As the night deepens, the tavern's atmosphere shifts from lively to intimate. Candles flicker low, shadows dance on the walls, and laughter softens to whispers. You feel a profound connection to this ancient world, its pleasures, its struggles, its unending search for meaning amid the chaos. You raise your cup in a silent toast to the baths, to the city, and to the countless souls who have walked these streets before you. The ritual of cleansing may have ended, but the story continues, woven into the fabric of Rome's endless night. The city sleeps around you, but your mind is alive, reflecting on the journey through steam, heat, cold, and stone. The Roman baths were more than places of hygiene. They were crucibles of culture, community, and human experience. You step outside into the cool night air, the stars above shining like distant torches, lighting the way home. The baths in the city are only a living legacy of sweat, water, and the indomitable spirit of Rome. You find yourself walking the dimly lit streets of Rome, the echoes of the day's bathing rituals still vivid in your mind. The night air is cooler now, carrying the distant murmur of the Tiber River and the soft flicker of oil lamps lining narrow alleyways. The city feels alive, yet peaceful, a place where history and humanity mingle beneath the stars. Your skin still glows faintly with the residue of oils and perfumes, a tactile reminder of the bath's long embrace. You run your fingers across your arms, recalling the rough pumice stones, the searing heat of the Laconicum, and the icy shock of the frigidarium. Eich Sensation Lingas, a patchwork of discomfort and delight woven into your memory. As you stroll, you pass familiar landmark temples bathed in moonlight, forums silent except for the rustle of leaves, and fountains murmuring gentle songs. The city is a mosaic of stories, and the baths were but one tiliol, be it a vivid and vital one. You think back on the social tapestry you glimpsed within those marble walls, senators debating laws, slaves toiling in shadows, lovers exchanging furtive glances, children laughing in the pools. The baths were a microcosm of Roman life, a place where class, culture, and humanity collided in steamy harmony. Historians still argue about the true nature of bathing culture, whether it was a luxurious indulgence reserved for the elite or a democratic ritual open to all. The truth is complex and layered, much like the baths themselves. They were spaces of paradox, filthy yet clean, chaotic yet ordered, private yet communal. You feel a quiet awe for the endurance of these rituals, carried forward through centuries of change and upheaval. The baths were more than hygiene. They were ceremonies of identity, connection, and transformation. Pausing on a bridge overlooking the river, you watch the moon's reflection ripple in the water, shimmering like liquid silver. The night holds a gentle stillness, a balm after the sensory storm of the baths. You close your eyes, breathing deeply. The steam, the scents, the voices all swirl within you. A living memory of a civilization's pursuit of balance between body and soul. As you turn to head home, a soft breeze carries the faintest trace of rose and myrtle, reminders of the bath's lingering magic. You smile, knowing that this ancient world of stone, water, and ritual has become a part of you forever. Word count: 1. 489. 300. Word wind down. Now, as your body settles from the journey through steam and stone, let yourself drift into a slow, soothing calm. Imagine the gentle warmth of the baths fading into a soft twilight, where every sound is a distant echo and every breath is deep and easy. The chaos and clamor of ancient Rome give way to a tranquil hush. Like a soft lullaby sung by marble and water, feel the day's tensions melt away, replaced by the lingering scent of olive oil and blooming flowers. Your skin remembers the rough touch of pumice and the silky caress of perfumed oils. But now, these sensations soften into a tender memory. The heat of the laconicum and the cool kiss of the frigidarium settle into a quiet balance within you. Let your mind wander gently through the mosaic patterns, the whispered conversations, and the shared laughter of 1,000 bathers. You are part of that endless stream, connected across time and space by the simple, a human need to cleanse, to connect, and to renew. In this soft, fading light, all worries lose their sharp edges. The world becomes a place of gentle rhythms and tender moments, a sanctuary where you can rest and dream. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sweet dreams.